So to me, languages are like religions, right? It doesn't mean that one is right or wrong, but it just means that, this one is the one that suits me best. I remember seeing the stuff from Jonathan Blow back in 2014, and I remember him showing the new syntax, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to get used to that. But then I saw the video of him explaining why is it like that, right? And as I'm watching, it's like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't, if you're doing a language, why wouldn't you rethink things? To me, GUIs are the best way to do interfaces, right? I just would love some kind of things like a little bit more flair and to have labels aligned to the left. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Let's start with a little bit of introduction. Who are you? And what is your background? How did you get into this mess, which is programming?
My name is Nuno Afonso, and I've got into games around 2008. So I actually didn't get into programming that early. I don't know how it is where you come from, but in Portugal we have this system that before you reach 10th grade, you kind of need to decide which branch do you want to go. So you have a few options. I think it was like 4 options. One of them was like humanities, which was like psychology and languages and stuff like this. Another one was economics, I think, which was basically math. And then there was sciences. And since I didn't really know what I was going to do and I was good at math, I thought, well, I'll just be an accountant. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to go for that. And unfortunately, right after this, so around 10th grade, this probably was like 97 or something like this, I then discovered programming. And it was like this friend of mine that he was doing some things with Visual Basic where it was really simple stuff. It was stuff like, you talk to a fridge and you go like, you type, what's in the fridge, right? And the fridge would say, I have eggs, I have milk, I have whatever, right? Stuff like this. Or who is this guy? And he's an annoying little fella, blah, 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 right? And it was basically just parse what is the input and then output something, right? It was just like a switch. But the whole thing sounded very appealing to me, this kind of thing that you can program a machine. Like before that, I didn't really think that much about it. Even with games, I played like Game Boy and stuff like this. I never really thought about there's actually a career of people that actually make these things, right? Never occurred to me. Also, because these things were not in Portugal, you didn't have like an industry. You probably still don't, but you wouldn't really think, like, oh, this is a viable option. And soon after, I discovered Final Fantasy VII, which was, for me, it was like an awakening. It was like, oh, this to me is like a work of art. Like the cutscenes, the story, the game. I love that game, and it not only pushed me towards maybe I need to see how to get into programming and getting specifically into games, but it also took me out of piracy. Right? It was that moment that I was like, yeah, I cannot pirate things, which was funny because I had just gotten like. Back then you could do this, you'd hand up the console to some dude somewhere and he would chip the console and then you could just, pay for CDs and you have games. So that was how I got off piracy. So it was that thing. So then slowly I tried to go towards games, but originally I couldn't because I went into economy branch, right? So I didn't have physics. So I joined a university that was telecoms. And the first year it was just programming stuff. So, I loved it. I liked the university. I liked my colleagues and I was doing good with the classes. And then the second year starts and it's telecoms and it was just god awful. I hated it. But it was still nice because I got while I was there, I did an internship for 3 months on the Portuguese Linux distribution. So I was doing some stuff there, like with a graphical package manager. And also, I don't know if do you remember Broken Sword game? Point and click adventure was really good in the 90s. They had something, I think it was on the first one, that when you're installing the game, because back then installing the games would take so long because you're just copying from the CD, you could play an Arkanoid. You know that game, that Breakout? What is it called? Breakout,
yeah,
Arkanoid, right? You could play while you're installing the game. And I thought, this is so fun. And I convinced the people from the Linux distribution to allow me to do an Arkanoid that while you're installing Linux, you can play it, right? That distribution,
Nice.
you can play it.
If you would like to support this channel, you can become a member on Patreon. You will be granted access to a private Discord channel where you can chat with other supporters and guests of this show. For more details, check out my website at łuka.sh. Łukasz.
But then eventually I got the ability to jump to another university because they stopped asking for physics. And, basically I would say that I really learned from university programming. I didn't really learn that much. I started dabbling in it a bit before university, but it wasn't anything interesting. Then university, I got into it. I got more excited with things because I was able to teach also some classes as an assistant. Yeah. And that gave me the opportunity to do a graphical simulator for circuits, right? So imagine that you're, doing boxes, right, and connecting them with wires and stuff like this. And it was really cool because it also connected to physical stuff. There was some guy, don't remember his name, but he was doing stuff with trains. So actual physical mock-up, what do you call it? Train sets, yeah? And so you could program this in the simulator, and then the best students that actually got the program to work in the simulator could make the simulator, instead of sending stuff to a simple Java interface of the trains, they could communicate with the track and actually have the train, going, stopping, changing tracks and whatever. It was really cool. No student wanted to do it. Everybody was just we passed the chair, the course, let's just go. But it was actually very fun to just work on it and getting it to work. It was super interesting. But then basically I decided initially I thought I was going to do career there in teaching because I liked it, but I didn't really like the environment. Felt it was a bit weird. Didn't fit me. And I wanted to do things. So I started looking for jobs, and that's how I got in the industry. So I think it was in 2008 that I got into this small indie company, which looking back was such a luck that I got into that company. I think it's because it's a really it's the experience that I wish everybody could have going into the industry. So it's a company called Isatex, and it was a very small company, indie company that was trying to do ambitious things, right? So what we were trying to do back then, the game director was Vincent. He was Dutch or is. I don't think he died. But we made fun of it because we joked how he once told us, guys, all I want to do is command and conquer generals in the browser. That's all I want to do. And we joked about this, right? We were like, who does he think we are? We're just a bunch of kids. He thinks we're EA. We're going to be doing a command and conquer. And this is in the browser. This is not even, in the desktop. And this back then was 2008. It was with Unity. And back then we didn't have anything. You didn't even have debugger in Unity. So you're trying to make this command and conquer game without even being able to debug complicated things, right? You would have to, something's not good here. Let's add a bunch of prints and try it again. And so it was very hard to do it. But because this was a hard project, they also hired somebody as a consultant that was very, very good, very, very experienced. His name is Ramon. And basically he was the one that actually helped me, guided me into going towards a different path in programming, right? He kind of made me see more about the simplicity of doing things and breaking some of the dogmas that you would pick up during university, during the traditional learning. And
can Can you be a
Correct.
bit more specific here regarding the dogmas and the simplicity?
Well, a lot of programming tends to be seen in a way that complexity is good. So you tend to do layers to wrap things a lot. You tend to do things like, for example, private and abstraction to the point that things outside cannot see it, and deep hierarchies of dependencies, right? So you have like hierarchies of classes. You have something that is like, it's an item, and then it extends and it's a weapon. And because you want to make a generic thing, it's equipable. And then because it is thing, it's a melee weapon. You tend to make these deep hierarchies, right? And he kind of broke these approaches to me and trying to make me see that there's an easier way to do things and things that make more sense and why they make more sense and stuff like that. So it's more on this kind of stuff. Like something that when I was in university, there was this kind of thing that was it was sold in the way of like programming is really hard and memory management is the hardest thing. So luckily we're almost done with that because we have smart pointers that you don't need to do that, and we have garbage collection, right? So it was in a way taught in a view that I don't believe is correct now with the experience that I've had, yeah. And it kind of triggers you to be afraid of doing things, right? Triggers you to be afraid of going too low level, and pushes you to go use this black box to solve this problem instead of doing something, right? There's a lot of that. Don't reinvent the wheel and stuff like that, right? And he kind of pulled me out of it, right? And because we're also doing stuff we're doing stuff that is complex to do, and we had to do it because there was no alternative, right? There was no asset store that we could just go, let me just grab a pathfinding thing. No, we had to do our pathfinding. There was no, Unity had a library that was actually pretty good, RackNet, but that's not a library that is set up to doing network for an RTS, right? So I need to learn, okay, how do I do a network for an RTS? So it was very, it was just a very eye-opening and very that's the thing. Like if people can go into a small company, a small group of people, like an indie company that is trying to do ambitious things, I think you'll learn a lot, right? Hopefully you'll have somebody there to help you guide it, but even not, it's like it's such a huge opportunity. So yeah, I worked on that company for like 4 years, and then basically tried to go to the UK, didn't like it. But from that, I did a cinematic tool for Unity to do, so a cinematic editor, right? So this was back then, you didn't really have anything to do this. There was like some asset store stuff that was used in one of our projects, but it was just flaky. You couldn't count on it. And so I did a bunch of decisions that would make it easier for you to do such a thing. The coolest thing that came out of this was somebody, I don't remember his name. I should have probably written some stuff down and do some research about this. But he did a cartoon, okay, using my plugin. Okay. And if you go to YouTube, it's called Mr. Carton, because it's mimicking the style of cardboard motion, stop motion. So it's a bunch of episodes. Like, I don't know if this also, you had it when you were growing up, but here we used to have these little cartoons that would show like 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes before the news at night. And usually they don't have sound. They're just like, you know what I mean? They were this kind of stuff. And they tended to be from France. Don't know why. And so he did something like this for TV. So that's actually pretty cool. From there, I then got the chance to go to Poland to work at CD Projekt. And I worked there for 4 years. Mostly I was on what was called the B team. They were trying to do a team that is doing things faster, smaller games faster, in between the big launches, right? And so there we developed Gwent and Thronebreaker. And then just before leaving, I worked for like 8 months on Cyberpunk, helping out for the second E3 demo. And then because of things that just happened there, I just decided it was my time to leave CD Projekt and leave Poland, come back to Portugal. So I quit. And then around that time, more or less, this was like 2019. I think it was 2020. I got access to the J beta, and I was like, okay. I started playing with it, started really liking it, being very enthusiastic about it. It kind of brought a breath of fresh air for me, because I got to a point that I was kind of delusioned with programming. It felt like it just didn't feel fun, yeah. And so I started really enjoying J, and then eventually I thought, okay, I want to do something serious with this, and that's what ARK then came along, right? Because it was like, okay, let me do a project that I can just focus on programming. I don't have to focus on game design or whatever. So just trying to do something.
So after 4 years in CD Projekt Red, you moved back to Portugal.
Yeah.
Around the time where COVID pandemic happened, 2020, you got access to Jai, the language that Jonathan Blow is developing, and then you started working on ARK.
Yeah.
While there was a lockdown.
Yeah, but
it's not okay.
The lockdown for me wasn't relevant.
Okay.
Because I was here and I was already working remotely, because then somewhere in the, I don't remember, but somewhere close to when I started working on ARK, I also started working remotely for a company, an outsourced company, which also didn't really particularly like the style of work like that. It doesn't suit me. But I was already working remotely with if COVID didn't happen, I would have continued working the same, because that's the model of that company. And then
So we're gonna spend majority of the time probably on ARK, but we have still your last 5 years that are non-ARK. Can we get a summary of that?
It's not very interesting. So I did like 2 years, I think, at a company that does outsourcing, right? So basically, it's a company that gets hired by other companies to do stuff, which I don't think I can talk about any of the things that we did there.
Although it's extremely common for everybody who is listening in game dev area, like for a lot of like AAA companies, like there's a lot of outsourcing happening.
Yeah. And so for a while it was funny because of the COVID thing, the project that I was going to enter, I didn't enter. So this company was acquired by Improbable. I don't know if you heard of them. They're trying to do, or they were trying, I don't know what's the status, but they were trying to do this kind of like distributed server approach, where you have huge worlds that are managed by multiple servers, right? So I was working a bit on that, and mostly I was doing like a test system so that you could debug that, so that you could test that things were working properly. Like, especially the main problems were transitioning between levels, you know what I mean, between servers. So you'd have like authority on one server. As you get close to the edge, you need to start communicating with the other guys to get the data kind of synced, and then there's a handoff, and then you're in another server. And I was working this kind of stuff. So, for example, when you I don't know, if you shoot a projectile, right? If you throw a grenade, that starts running on one server, and then it eventually gets transported to the other one, and you need to make it so that it looks like it's not, desyncing or whatever. So after 2 years, it wasn't really for me. I decided to go back to games, because there's a big difference between working in a company that you're really part of a team versus just a company that is trying to deliver something. I can't explain well, but it's night and day. That's all I can say. It's very different to feel.
But you mean like a company that is making a game, developing a game, and the company that is making game tech?
No, it's more about being part of the team making the game versus being outsourced doing work for a team. Like, okay, you're not really part of the team, and there's conflicts of interests, right? Because what may be best for the team and for the game may not align with what's best for this outsourcing company. Does that make sense? So it's something that it just didn't go very well for me. Like, nothing that I, if people like it, go ahead. But for me, it wasn't that engaging. So I went back to games, and I joined Flying Wild Hog, which is another Polish company. And I worked there also for, was it 3 years? I think it was 3 years. Basically till July this year, or May this year. And also decided to leave for multiple reasons. But, I just, there was an opportunity to join a new project that started. It's a new company called Neo Ronin, which is a company done in Portugal. But still working, people are still working remotely. And from it, I can't say much yet because it's just a new company. It's, they don't have anything public. I think next year we'll start to share stuff, but it's nothing visual, nothing visible at the moment.
Okay. Awesome. I can see a trend there, though. 2 companies that you liked, both in Poland. See? Huh? So if something doesn't pan out in the new company, you know where to look for the game development studio.
I think Poland is a very interesting country. I liked a lot the time that I spent there. My main concern was pollution. This was the thing that started affecting me quite a bit. I remember that I was always at home like I didn't know what was happening. And then one day I just noticed, wait, when I'm at work, this doesn't happen. And yeah, because CD Projekt had these filters around the building that would just clean the air. So I realized that, I need to have air filters at home, right? But the country itself, I think the culture is quite similar to Portuguese culture. And I liked it a lot. Like it was very interesting. And it has a very strong industry. There's tons of companies. There's tons of people. Like, it's one of those things, whenever you talk with somebody, it's like, yeah, I've been at CD Projekt, from this year to this year. Oh, I was there from this year to this year. Like, it's kind of like everybody goes through CD Projekt, right? So you make a lot of, you meet a lot of people that have similar journeys to you. And yeah, a lot of talent. Like, it's funny because even if you look at outside companies, so companies from the US or whatever, a lot of times you look at specifically tech stuff. I noticed, maybe in other areas it also happens, but you'll see this tech director is clearly Polish. And then if you go check, they're like, they worked on Witcher 1 or something like this. Yeah. So yeah, it's very prolific. The industry there is very, very nice. And I recommend, if people have the opportunity to move there and live there, I recommend. At least Warsaw was very nice.
Now, on to the main topic, which is ARK. Can you tell me and everybody who is listening, what is ARK and why are you building it?
So, ARK is a version control system focused on complex projects like video games. So this usually means that there are projects with a lot of people working on them, a lot of files, a lot of binary files. So, a lot of data, a lot of gigs. It does an approach of developing GUI-First, okay, which is something that I think is it's the right way to develop tools, and you don't see it that often. Like, you usually see people just create a CLI, a command line interface, and then they wrap that with the GUI, right? So ARK is a different approach. It focuses first on going with the GUI and then exposing things to the CLI. It tries to be fast and easy to use, but still very feature-full, right? Because when you're doing complex projects, there's a bunch of features. Like, you could do a simpler version control system, but then you would be missing out on some things that actually have some important use cases, right? And then on top of that, it also has a little bit of, I would say, like, sprinkled a little some of my interests into this kind of like trying to do better software. So it focuses on doing a minimal app, so trying to make the app as small as possible without any dependencies. So the app is just one binary file. It's multi-platform. It makes easy, or tries to make easy server management, and it's like also focused on letting you own your data, right? So it's not trying to be something that is a service that you're tied to some cloud service or something. You can just have it running on your own machines. and it also focuses on a fair licensing model, right? So the idea that you buy permanent licenses, and those licenses, you can just keep using it forever, and you don't have to, renew and stuff like that.
Okay. Now, for everybody who is not working in game development and is not working in big tech like Google, they are probably now confused, because why would you make something that is not Git? Okay? Like, why isn't Git the only version control system that we ever needed and use? Why ARK?
So ARK came about based on my experience working in the industry and just noticing when things are not working like they should, right? So seeing the hurdles that you need to jump through. The game industry is very focused on Perforce, but I also think that Git is not a good version control system. So maybe I'll explain this into two phases. One is like focusing more on Git, right, and the other one focusing on Perforce. So Git is a cool piece of tech, but I would say that it's a version control system that 99.9% of developers don't need. Okay? The root of Git is around this kind of concept of decentralization, right? That's at the core. That's the main thing. So you kind of need to think when you have something like that, like a tool like that, is what are the pros of having such a concept versus the cons? And you hear a lot of people. So, okay, let's just start from this. Git is, because in a big part because of decentralization, is a more complex or complicated to use tool. And you hear a lot of people or a vocal minority talking about, no, Git is great. You just don't get Git. There's nothing to be afraid of it. You just need to understand the architecture of Git, and then when you understand, you'll be a pro at it and whatever. And to me, this is just the weirdest cope ever. It's like saying that I cannot drive a car until I understand how the engine works. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to me. To me, the whole point of a tool is grabbing something that is, let's say that you can just automate to make it simpler, right? But it's also about removing complication out of a process. And Git, in my opinion, adds a lot of complication to the process. So the easiest way to think about this is, because you have a decentralized model or architecture, what happens is you need to have commits that have to be uniquely identified. If you have a centralized server, you can just have something that gives out IDs, right? So I just go 1, next comes 2, next comes 3. If you don't have this, you need to rely on a system like hashes. That's what Git uses, right? And once first of all, this is just a personal thing. Yeah, maybe people will call it a skill problem. Sure, that's fine. I'll take it. But I personally don't like to create a software that has to be reliable to a certain, ARK is not really, it's not a text editor, right? What is the worst that can happen if you make a bad text editor mistake? It's not like you're going to destroy somebody's work or a project's work, right? So I don't like to have to think about what are the potential problems from using a hash system to uniquely identify things. What if there's problems in 5 years? What if there's problems in 10 years? Because I don't understand, or I don't foresee, or I took for granted the unlikeliness of collisions within those hashes. And this is not a problem that I want to have, right? But even if you go like, no, these hashes are perfect hashes that will never have a collision, which, by the way, was something that happened already in Git history, that they actually had collisions, and then I think they changed the hashing function or whatever. But let's say that this is a perfect hash. The problem is you're losing your ability to reason about your commits. This is specifically important if you are in charge of releasing things. So if you're releasing a project, and especially if you have to release often. So for example, Gwent had the live service, right? So we had to release, which is, usually this is the commonality of games. Either you release often because it's live service, or you release like every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's like extremes. So you quite often need to release. A lot of these discussions happen in the middle of hallways, or in the middle, you're just doing something in conference rooms or whatever. So you need to be able to, it helps to be able to reason about what's happening. So if I know that I'm doing a build from changelist 1000, I know that anything that was committed before 1000 is in that build. Anything that was committed after 1000 is not on that build. Maybe a lot of people don't value this, but as somebody that was in charge of releasing things, to me this is useful, right? Because when I'm talking with somebody, did this get fixed? Yes. Where did it go? Okay, it went in 998. Okay, it's in. Did that bug get fixed? Oh yeah, it went in 1002. Okay, stop everything, tell QA, abort the testing, push a new build for version 1002 because we need that for whatever reason, and start testing the new version as soon as possible instead of wasting time with the old one. This helps. So you're losing this capability once you have hashes, because once you have hashes, you no longer have this way of reasoning about what's happening, what's in your build, right? You're going to need to execute some command and do something, right? And again, a lot of people don't think this is valuable. To me, it's the same thing as IPv6. It's far easier for me to talk with somebody and share something with somebody by just saying, because here's the thing, if you have an ID, you have 1 million change lists. So you're working in 1,323,322. If I'm communicating with somebody, what really matters is the final digits. It's the 322. So if somebody goes like, oh, has this been, have you pushed this, or have you shelved this, or whatever? And you can just say, yeah, it's 322, right? You don't need to reason about the full number. Once you're with hashes, you're going to have to be more verbose, and you're most likely going to have to go in there and copy paste. These are things that may feel meaningless to a lot of people, but again, the tools are there to help you achieve goals. They shouldn't be there to hinder your goals. With this kind of complexity, right? There's also another thing, or that comes with this complexity, that is the graph. So when you're working in Git, so let's say that I'm working on something, right? I'm working on file A. While I'm working on file A, you're doing, or a bunch of people are just pushing things. If I now want to commit this, or actually if I want to push, right? When I go to push, Git is going to go, no. There's changes. You need to solve, you need to make this tree proper, right? Your tree is different from the other tree. So it forces me to go and pull those 30 things. Right there, depending on settings or whatever, you're going to be challenged with a question. Wait, there's a problem, right? I use Sublime Merge, and it immediately flags it as like, there's an error, Do you want to merge or rebase? Like, this is not something I want to worry about. Like, this is, again, a lot of people may love this kind of stuff, but this is the kind of stuff that puts off a lot of people, especially non-technical people, from using the tools. They're afraid of this kind of like daunting feeling.
What if it will break, like this mentality, right? Like, I don't want to use it. I'm not technical. I don't want to have a situation where something will break and I don't know how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, can we do a bit of a summary now?
Go ahead.
First, you touched on the hashes of Git commits, mm-hmm. and you said that ideally you would have an ordered list, mm-hmm. which has easy identifiers so that you can reason about what is in, what is not in. Mm-hmm. And a second thing, now you mentioned that the Git pushes this responsibility to solve merge conflicts when you want to add something to the tree.
Here's the thing, we're not even at conflicts, right? Because what you actually have is, let's say, a conflict of trees, of branch, of paths, right? Because the file that I'm touching hasn't been touched in any of the commits that happened. So we're not even in commit conflict area, right? We're in tree conflict area, right? Because I was here and main was here. I hope this is visible. And then, I committed something. So I'm here and this guy's different, right? And now somebody committed. So there's different trees. So what you're having to deal with is conflicts of trees. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah. On the level of like how Git works, yes, but from the user perspective, I never solved a like tree conflict, right?
No, you solve it because when you're trying to push, it says no, you need to pull. And then when you pull, you choose rebase and hopefully there's no conflict and it just puts the tree under your commit, right? So you're actually solving a conflict, but it's just if there's no actual conflict, it's simple to solve, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And this kind of stuff, it makes it harder for you to work. And again, people may not care about this, but the way we work a lot in games is in the morning you get in, you get latest, right? And potentially you're going to download gigs of things. You're potentially going to recompile the whole engine. Right? You're going to recompile the whole engine, which is going to take like 20 minutes. So then you kind of want to just work. You're doing stuff, you want to commit, it goes to somebody else, right? You don't want to have to be forced to get work that is going to hamper your ability to develop that day, right? Because now if all of a sudden I just touched file A, nobody else touched file A. If I try to commit that, right, and I have to download all the other commits, maybe there's a commit that breaks the compilation. So now I'm stuck because I need that to be sorted. Or can just very easily happen, you need to recompile the engine. And if you need to recompile the engine, that's like 20 minutes, depending on the engine, whatever, right? But on the project that I was, it was quite common that if something in the core of the engine gets changed, you have 20 minutes to build on a 24-core machine, right? So it breaks your working, your workflow. It breaks your productivity, right? So this is a problem. Some people may not think that this is a problem, but this is a problem, right? It's more daunting to use, and it forces you to change your mindset, which brings me to another problem that because of all this, people tend to like working in... That's the thing. Even if you don't like working, you're kind of forced to work like this because you always have the origin master, let's say, and then you have your local master. So by default, Git encourages or kind of subtly forces you to do the branch-driven development, which I think is the wrong thing, and we can talk about that later, but I think it just gives you more problems and no real gain. And then people that use Git, that love that world, that complexity, then go all in and actually branch to do everything, right? So they compound on the problem. Being branch-driven, and people may not realize, but like a lot of things, that's the thing. If you don't work in games, you may not realize a lot of things. It may not make sense to you. Games are projects that have a very tight relationship between assets and source code, right? Because you're going to do some class, and then from this class you have a prefab or whatever, blueprint, whatever, data asset. And then you're going to put this in the world somewhere, and then somebody's going to go in and move it and change the defaults. And then, at some point you're going to have to edit this, right? So once you have branch-driven development, you may not realize, but what you're doing is you're breaking up the life cycle of files. Does that make sense? Because you're going off to the side, and now you have a timeline going up here, and you have a timeline going here, and they're going at different paces. So when you're working, especially with a lot of people, and again, something that happens in games, like if you're doing a website, you may have somebody that has to update the pictures, right? But this is like one dude that goes in, updates the pictures. Maybe the pictures stay there for 6 months, a year, or whatever. And then there's new pictures. Some other dude potentially replaces those pictures. But games, you have these assets that are binary, or even if they're not binary, they behave like binary, which is a different problem, where you have multiple people at the same time trying to edit these files for multiple reasons, right? So what's going to happen is if you have timelines separated, lifetimes separated, you're going to get more likely to have issues of later when you're merging, you completely break things. Because you're going to, for example, you create a code for a specific kind of asset. And now you're in your branch doing your new feature and you're iterating on the code, hopefully fixing all the other assets that were already existed. But here on the side, you have somebody developing that. And now you're going to go into PRs to accept and whatever. Like the likeliness that you did some change that is going to break an asset starts to go up as you work in projects like games, right? Where you have this tight coupled connection. So this is another problem, right? If I'm going too deep, if I'm going too boring, just let me know.
That's great, but at some point we need to match this into like, okay, how this relates to ARK and how ARK solves these problems. So we cannot stack them forever.
No, we're building a tower, a pancake, okay? We're building a pancake because we still didn't get to the real elephant in the room, right? Which is working with binaries.
Yep.
The way Git works is just not made to work with binaries. The whole point is that you're decentralized, so you have the whole copy of your repo. And what this means that if you have an image that is 50 megs, which is not that uncommon these days to have in game development, and you have 10 versions of it, because they're not, it's also not uncommon because people iterate on art and whatever, right? So now you have 500 megs and everybody needs 500 megs of textures, right? So this is a problem of Git. And Git then has something put on top, but you can see that it wasn't done by the same people and by the same, it's not the same team, let's say, that conceptualized these two systems. Because everybody that I talk to that has worked in big projects, in like big game projects with that actually they use Git, all the real problems that happen are with Git LFS, right? That's the solution for Git. So instead of you having the 500 megs on your disk, what you have is, no, you have the 50 megs because it's the last version that you have. And then you have hashes to, oh, this version of the file is this identifier. So now you're forced to go centralized. So you started this whole thing about having a concept, about having a system that is decentralized, but because of the nature of the things you work with, you need to go centralized.
In what way?
Because now I need to have access to that centralized server that stores the assets.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I cannot just work offline, right? I need to go push stuff to that server and get stuff from that server, right? I'm forced to have a centralized point. So now you're at a point, right, that you have the problems of the decentralized system, right? And no gain from the decentralized system because you still need to work in a centralized fashion, right? This goes further because binaries is not just where do we store this, it's also who can access the binaries. Again, think of if you're making a level, it's quite common that you have, for example, the level, the file of the level, right? The scene. And you'll be doing changes and I'll be doing changes. So now I'm working, I'm doing things and you commit your version. When I go to commit, it says, you have a conflict. People committed that file. Now you need to resolve it. And there's no good solution. Your solution is to annoy you and overwrite all that you did, or to annoy me, get your version, and then redo all my stuff on top again. So you need to have a mechanism that is called, in some systems, checkout. ARK calls locking. Yeah, it's locking files, where you go, I want to lock this file. And while you have the lock ownership, you're the only one that can commit this file. Right? Is it the best solution in the world? No. But is better than the alternative. The alternative is just frustration, right? It's just things being broken. Or, you fix the CL, you fix a bug, you push it, close this, and then 2 days later it appears back because somebody overrode it. Like, you cannot work like that, right? So this, I think, concludes like the problems with Git, right? And again, this needs to be centralized. And now this cannot even be a sparse centralized thing. It cannot be just, only when I need to commit, I need to have access to it. No, now I need to have this ability to go, I need this asset, right? And somebody wants to commit and he goes, no, this guy has the asset, right? You know what I mean? So basically that's the side of Git covered.
Okay. Now, one small comment / question. You make a lot of emphasis on the decentralization and centralization. And mostly what I've experienced is that if you work with Git, you always have one remote, even though you can have more than one in theory. 99, I really like, apart from some wild experiments, you don't do more than one remote. Mm-hmm. So you have sort of a central version, and then everybody checks out this version, and then everybody commits to this version. So sort of your remote version is the one that is like central, and whatever you have on your local computer is sort of your copy that you're working on. And obviously in Git you can overwrite quite easily what is there on the remote, so on the central version. So this frustration, like especially with the binary files that you can't really resolve in a meaningful way in a conflict, will happen. But I don't think I really get this distinction between the centralization and centralization that you talk about. Like, what do you mean when you say, like, because of the Git decentralization we have these problems or something like that?
So it's just things that, like, let's put it this way. What is the point? Because like you're saying, most people actually use it centralized in a way, right? Yeah. Because you're using GitHub or whatever. But so then you could make the argument, why have it decentralized if people use it centralized, right? And that's why I mean that 99.9% of people actually don't need it, because the way you work is, and people make, but what if I want to code on the plane? It's like, dude, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm trying to solve a real problem. It doesn't matter. But this is an issue that you're still working in a centralized way, but you have the inconveniences of the decentralized. Do you know what I mean? Because now, for example, you cannot use Git. You need to get Git with LFS, and all the problems that are going to come from LFS. Because LFS, look, it may be a great project. I don't know, but every person I've talked to, they never complain. Like, the complaints from Git are generally things like, people keep coming. Let's say the artists come to me all the time because they have some weird things, and I have to go there and fix their commits, right? And that's the complexity of Git. But the real problems of, like, I've had people telling me, like, they would get assets from Git LFS, and instead of being the assets from their branch, Git LFS was getting the assets from another branch. These are horrible problems to have. You know what I mean? Or for example, that it became corrupted for some reason. So then the only thing you can do is delete everything and get fresh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have even though you're using it kind of centralized, you still have that problem, right?
So what would be for you the true central version control system? Like, how would it look like?
A good example is Perforce, because Perforce is king in game development, right? Which is part of the curse of Perforce, right? Because it took the market, and if you look at Perforce 10 years ago and you look at Perforce today, you need to squint to try to find the differences, right? Because it's just something that stagnated. And a full centralized system is just a system that, first of all, you control everything in one place, right? So whenever I'm going to commit, everything is going to the same place. You don't have this two-stage. You don't have commit and then push, right? You just commit straight into the main server. Also, it gives you all these things of not just the data, the binary handling, but it also gives you these things like the locking, right? Yeah. It gives you these tools of if somebody locked a file and went on holiday, that somebody can override it and whatever. You know what I mean? So it's just, this is what I would call a real centralized system, right? It gives you the linear story, the history, right? User management, like it just handles everything for you from that point, right?
And so there's also some level of authority on the central aspect of it, like
because you can have which a lot of companies do, right? That some teams cannot access some projects because of whatever reason. It may be that you're working with an external studio and you want to do the limitation. So it's just good to have that built in. And I think that probably a lot of people that use GitLab or whatever, they also have like this, because basically that's what GitHub is giving you. It's like a layer on top for user management, basically. So I think that they all do that kind of stuff anyway, right? Because you cannot just put Git and you need to have something else there.
Yes, but I would say more often than not, it will fall into like who can access this repository, less so who can access this branch. Like you can have either read-only or write-only access to repository, but not fine-grained on like, oh, you can touch these files, but not these ones. And this is the problems that you keep mentioning, that like if you have assets, especially binary assets that are touched, like 50 different people working on them and modifying stuff at the same time, like there's no real alternative from Git to help with that, because there's no locking. Right. So
but that's
now
the thing, you can piggyback on Git LFS to get the locking, right? Because you always need that centralized thing, and Git LFS allows you to do that locking, piggyback on it, right?
Now, how ARK mitigates the Git inconveniences?
So a lot of it is just trying to be a simpler tool to use. So the fact that it's centralized, right, helps a lot with doing this kind of stuff. The fact that you just don't have you're not forced to kind of go down the branch-driven approach, that you can focus on a trunk-based development, helps a lot with people developing. Like when a lot of people look at version control, what they kind of want is Dropbox that just allows me, I can just put files in this folder. I want these files to go to the server. Whenever I push a new version, it remembers that I pushed new versions. I can get them from another computer. And, if I need an older version, I can go get it, right? So ARK tries to just be more friendly in this approach, right? There are certain things that I think a lot of people into Git will not value, like the fact that it's GUI-First. Like the fact that you don't need to get an external tool in order to use it. And if you work in projects like games, a while back I did a comparison video of trying to import Unreal Engine into ARK and trying to import it into Perforce and Git, right? Some source tree, which is the most famous like free version of GUI, I even killed it after 30 minutes because it wasn't getting there. Like, and that's the thing. It's not getting there, and it's being frustrating, right? Because it becomes unresponsive. You don't know what's happening. Am I close to the end? I'm not close to the end, right? So there's a bunch of things like this that ARK tries to make it easy for you to do this kind of this kind of things. It has all the things with locking and handling binaries and stuff like this. Like out of the box, you don't have to worry about setting up an external tool. It's just I would say that it's mostly about simplicity and allowing you to focus on this trunk-based development that, in my opinion, is much more productive if you need to do stuff like in game in general, I would say, but in games specifically, I think it's imperative.
And it has ordered commits, or do you
Yes.
call them differently?
Yes.
It's the commits though.
Yeah, it's the
name.
change list ID. Yeah.
Okay, change list ID. Okay.
And for example, because we didn't really talk about Perforce, but Perforce doesn't have good branching, right? And ARK tries to do good branching as Git. So you have like the the tree view, right, of the branches. In fact, I prefer my approach to the Git clients because generally Git clients do something that annoys the hell out of me, is that when you jump between branches or whatever, the colors change and the branch lines move. And I think this is just so hard. It's just not good tools, right? So, there's a bunch of things that because in the end, ARK basically takes what I think are the best ideas of Git, the best ideas of Perforce, and then some new things or some things that are just elevated versions of what already exists, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now I'm a bit confused because you told me how branches suck, and now you're telling me that ARK has branches. So can you expand on that?
So it's not that branches suck, it's branch-driven development sucks, right? And it has to do with this kind of stuff because you're breaking apart the lifetime of things that should be very tightly coupled. So, for those that are not aware, there's this concept that is called, which is the original, okay, that is trunk-based development. So when you're doing development in Git, usually what people do is you have master, and you have things that branch out, create instability, and then branch back in. Master is like the stable one, right? Yep. Trunk-based development is a different approach. Trunk-based development is trunk, which was the name they gave it before, like ARK calls it dev because I think it's a better name, but it's like the dev branch. It's like the base branch is where you have all the chaos, right? People just work there. People commit more often. They can break things, and that's fine. It's not something you need to be too worried. Within reason. And then what you do is you branch for stability. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So what this means is that because every time you need stability, you need to slow down. So if your methodology of development is master is stable, every single commit you're doing, you're going to slow down. Because, and then again, there's the problem of, or just the dogma of people that use Git to an insane extent, that they go all into the reviews and the PRs, and then the PR needs to be approved by this guy, and then this guy can't see it, so we need to wait. These are all things that just extend it. But just by default, you have this thing of, you're bringing instability in and stabilizing it. And when you're doing trunk-based development, you're just going, it's unstable, and then you're getting close to a release. So then what you do is you branch out, which a lot of times people call these branches staging, right? Because you're staging to get ready to launch. And now you have a limited set of people working here, and they should be just, if things are going well, they should just be stabilizing what's there. Other people can continue here adding content, doing more things, breaking, whatever, it doesn't matter. These people that are working here, which usually it's programmers, it's technical artists, and more in generally tends, the further out, the more lead the person usually is. Yeah, like you don't have everybody just going there. And this person is like focusing on, and these people are just focusing on stability. So you're going to do bug fixes, you're going to do corrections. You're hopefully not going, if you're doing new features on staging, you're failing. Okay, you're doing it wrong. The idea is this should be hardening. This should be settling down the bugs and removing things. And so you have unstable version where everybody still is, and you have a stabler version, and merging from stable to unstable, it's much, much simpler. Because you're generally doing much smaller changes, and you're actually fixing problems that need to be fixed anyway on the other version. Right? So doing this merge, first of all, it's much faster because you don't need an approval, blah, 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 right? And it's much easier than doing unstable to stable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, it makes sense.
And then generally, there's this kind of hardening, right, on staging. And then sometimes, like in Gwent, that's what we did. We had main, staging, and then live. So live is the version that then goes and is running on the servers. And now you can potentially do hotfixes there, and we did it sometime, but these should be super, super minor stuff. right? Otherwise, the process failed somewhere along the way, right?
So now I get this process for something that releases every 5 years. I have trouble understanding how this would this look like for live service. So now can you give me a bit of an example? Because like if you have a main that is stable, a main master, whatever, and the idea is that like it's always stable after you merge. Like some companies I've worked at had the integration so that whatever you merge to main automatically is being deployed to development environment, pre-production environment, and then production environment. So basically your like last call is to do the review and then get an approval, because then what will happen is that the code, as long as it will not break any of the environment and the tests will pass, it will find itself on production. Now, if you're saying that trunk is the unstable one, and this is where people are committing, and you branch off to do the staging, at some point from staging, you will get to the live. And I think you have like two things that you need to maintain, right? Like on one hand, you have the live thing, and on the other hand, you have a trunk. So how does this work?
Like generally the live, you're not really maintaining it, right? Okay. Again, if you're doing a lot of stuff when you're on live, it's a problem. It means that your development is so unstable that you're not being able to stabilize or test things before or whatever, right? I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that it shouldn't. So usually things that happen on live, when we did it in Gwent, it was more things like, for example, it's not a bug with the game, it's a bug with the data. So we find out that there's this use case where if you use a combination of cards in Gwent, it could trigger perfectly legal, but it could trigger an infinite loop. Because it's like a card that does something and then sends the other card to the hand, and then the other hand you put it down, and you could do these kinds of things. So generally, when we had live updates, the live updates were mostly content-related things. So it's like, okay, we need to nerf this card because of some reason, or this card is actually breaking, we need to deactivate it. So it was this kind of stuff. You shouldn't be changing code, or you should avoid. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but the problem is you need to also think that when you have a live game, you have this, the train is going, right? So this train is already somewhere and some people are on it, but you have another train coming that is going to have to exit in another month because you have to release in another month. So a lot of times you just go, as long as things are not super breaking, you just go, okay, we'll just do it in trunk for the next release, right? At some point you need to make those calls. So stuff on live should be mostly like little things that you need to tweak, right?
So you're saying that the live version, let's say this would be like live 1, when we went like release the first version, and then the train is going. By the way, I love this analogy. I first heard this from Marcin Undak, who is now working at Blizzard. I also worked at CD Projekt, and he told me, like,
we all come back to CD Projekt.
Imagine a train. Train will not stop. People fly in, fly out, like features go in, content gets in, but train is not stopping.
Yeah.
So train is still going, and at some point we reach, let's say, the release number 2, which we want to hit live. So we would again make a new branch of the trunk, and then replace what has been in the live 1 with the live 2 version.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that once you do the live version, you have now 2 things that you need to keep, maintain.
I can see how that can be confusing because, and honestly, a lot of times what happens is because, and again, this has to do with the complexity of Perforce. Because you don't want to create live 1, live 2, live 3, you would create a staging and a live, right? And then the system administrator, because these are not things that normal mortals can do, would go in, nuke that staging, copy trunk into staging, and now this is the new staging. So then people that have the workspace set up, they are still on staging, but just completely different data, right?
Yeah.
But I would just like to point out an exception that is sometimes, but you should use this very, very rarely, right? it is useful to have a branch, a long living branch that is outside for a long time. This happened when I was developing the new core of Gwent. There was this core revamp that gave like tons of open opportunities and whatever. And so I had the branch that was alive for 3 months, right? And I was working like on main game things that have to be released on this. And on the extra time, I was working on that other branch to be the new core. And eventually that new branch got merged in, right? But
Okay.
you should avoid it. It's much simpler. Like Gregory from Naughty Dog had this, Jason Gregory, I think it's his name, had this talk with Casey about this kind of stuff. It's just, it feels counterintuitive when you're just skimming it. But if you're doing trunk-based development, things will be much more stable. Your development iteration will be much faster. Things will be much better tested. Because if you have everybody working on the same branch, you can just, for example, let's say that you're working on a feature that is not going to be used for the next staging, right? The next branch that you're going to do for releasing. You just put that under a flag that just goes, this functionality is off. But you still have the whole code there. So everything is compiling. QA is testing build that has your code. And if you need then a QA to do some test specific for you, you can just tell them, hey, go to this setting, turn it on, and now you can debug it on the same build without having to do custom builds. Like it's much, much better if you focus on trunk-based development.
Yeah, when I started working in, generally speaking, tech world, I joined Akamai company, and they had releases like every 6 weeks, and I was like, I learned about like continuous development, you know, and like we should do this like continuously. So every time we merge to main, we develop, and like I considered the release cycle to be such a thing of the past. And now I came back to release cycle in my current work, and I'm like, this is such a benefit, you know? Like if you have this ability to like every now and then you say, now we're gonna test. Now we're gonna see whether we know what we think about the current state of the system is actually this state, not some sort of imaginary state that we think it is. We're gonna really test this thoroughly, and then we can release it. And with the idea of like every time you merge to main, at some point your system grows to the size that you kind of think like expect this to work, but you never really test it because you tested this bit when you merged it, you tested this bit when you merged it, and there's like huge thing in the middle that is already there for past like 5 years on production, and you kept layering new technology, new stuff on top of it, and you hope it's all in sync, but you never really took time to go through like every now and then to test it thoroughly. Like I love releases now. So the stuff that you are saying that is like, hey, split it up. Even if you're doing releases often, like still split it up into releases. Not like every commit needs to be released, but every now and then you do release and you have a process for releases. This, I can see the appeal of that. And the idea of merging stuff fast that you're developing and then every now and then stabilizing. This probably, there's a fine line between developing fast and merging such a broken code that nothing compiles at all. You know, like if I'm developing this fast, or like I'm careless to the point that I just modify every single file and now entire, let's say 100 people team cannot work. Like this sort of a shortcoming, no?
Yeah, but that's the thing, like, because some people may understand it as, oh, this is chaos, the people are just pushing things that don't compile and whatever. That's not the case, right? Like it can happen, and a lot of times it would happen because of actually Perforce, which is another thing we didn't discuss, but some files wouldn't be committed, and then actually it doesn't compile or whatever, and you need to push a new commit with the files that didn't go. But generally, people, like a developer is responsible to get things at least compiling, right? If things are not compiling, then this is something that needs to be handled, right? You need to handle that problem somehow, right? And also, once you get close to releases, there are certain things that you put in place, right? Like, for example, if you have some kind of testing framework, then when you're in the staging, you don't actually commit straight away. You go and you shelve it. This is a term in Perforce, which is basically like, hey, send this to the server, but keep it there on the side. Don't mix it with the main code. And then the build machines can go like, get this shelf, build. Does it build? Cool. Run some tests. Do the tests pass? Cool. And then potentially tell you you can merge or just merge it automatically. Commit it, right? So there's there's steps there, but it's quite different to have this step only when you are committing. When you are releasing, versus continuously, right?
Yeah.
Something that was also very common because again, you want some kind of control, and sometimes people are sneaky. So companies tend to implement these systems of codes. So in order for you to commit, producer or your lead needs to give you a special hash kind of code that you need to put in your commit message. Otherwise, the Perforce will reject your commit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because again, this is a problem with people, right? Sometimes people just sneak in, I did this, but I had all this thing already here. I just push, and you cannot do that when you're going towards, a stability thing. You're going towards a release, right? And because, sometimes even if you have a long game cycle, you have things that you need to hit. You need to hit the VGA awards or whatever, right? You need to hit back then the E3 demos. So you need to have this, even if you have a long running project, you need to have this stability, hardening kind of approach.
Yeah. Okay, now we have a lot to cover still, and we're already hour in. So can we go quickly through the same process with Perforce as we did with Git, outlining a summary for how Perforce works for everybody who is not familiar, and then how this translates into inconveniences that then are being solved with ARK.
So Perforce main problem is that it's old and it's successful, right? So two problems, let's say. So because it's like Perforce has like 30 years, okay? And because it's successful, it has like the industry, all the big players. Usually the way it goes is, can you afford Perforce? You use it, right? And it's not because it's such a good tool. It's because it's better than the alternative for games, right? Because if you're doing websites or things that are more decoupled, you can live very well with Git, right? Like it has quirks, sure, but you can live with it very well. If you have very few binary assets, you can even not use Git LFS. You can just go, I just use Git. What does it matter if I have, let's go crazy, a gig of full binaries, right? It's meaningless. When we're talking about game projects, we're talking about a working copy. So a project that a person has in their computer is like 300, 400 gigs, right? A project that is in then the server with all the versions, it's like 2 teras, 3 teras, 4 teras, right? So it's a completely different magnitude, right, of issue. So because it has this success and it has this like capture on the industry, it doesn't really advance very fast, right? Things are just very stagnant. You have very complex server management. Usually no, every company that actually has Perforce, like every game company that has Perforce, it has at least one, sometimes 2 or 3 people that manage Perforce. They not only because they not only do things like, okay, now guys, we're branching this project, so we need to nuke this staging, copy a new staging. But they then also have to do, okay, so now we have to set up continuous integration for this specific branch. Now we have to do a password, a hash, commit hash for permissions to commit. Like they just build things on top. So you usually have at least one, but bigger studios have 2 or 3. I think CD Projekt had like 2, I think, when I left. But that's not really the problem with Perforce. The problems for me with Perforce are it's just not trustworthy. Okay? So here's how it works. This has to do with how, like, probably technical limitations in the past. Perforce doesn't really track your changes. So their trick is whenever you have a project in Perforce, so you get it, right, to your local copy, the latest, it marks everything as read-only. So it changes the permission of the files in your folders, right? So when you're trying to use an editor like Visual Studio and you try to save, it's going to be like, this is read-only, you can't do it. So then Perforce lives with plugins. So every tool that you use with Perforce generally has plugins. So Visual Studio has, like whatever Rider has, Unreal has, which Unreal is probably one of the best ones in terms of integration with Perforce. So that when I go like, okay, I'm going to save the file, it goes, we're using Perforce to track. Ask the Perforce server, because again, it communicates with the server and goes, hey, I want to access this file. Okay, check it out. And then Perforce has this concept of checking out and exclusive checkout. Exclusive checkout is the locks that only one person can have, but checkout means that just, a person has it or not, right? So you and I can have source code checked out. That doesn't influence committing because it's just text and it allows it to merge easily. So you have this system. Historically, these plugins worked very poorly. The one that was really famous was the one from Visual Studio that was delivered by Perforce itself. So this was the official plugin. And sometimes you're working, the plugin would just for whatever reason disconnect silently. So then you're doing stuff, but changes are not being tracked, right? And so you go, you commit. If you don't notice, you push just part of the code. And then somebody complains, hey, builds are broken. It's missing this file. And you go, what? Okay, yeah, disconnected. Okay, now you need to do an operation that is called reconciling. Reconciling is you select a folder and you just say, hey, go through this hierarchy and see what new things are there that I'm not tracking, what things that I'm tracking that have changes, and what things that I'm tracking that were deleted. They're not here anymore, right? So they should be told to be deleted in the server. So you need to do this. Because this system is so manual, let's say, right? Because you need to resort through this mechanism. What tends to happen is that you cannot just go reconcile the project. First of all, this takes a lot of time. Like if you reconcile a project, it takes minutes. You can just wait, and it just stays there for a long time, and then eventually it tells you something. But the biggest problem is because everything works on this method of, if a file wants to be added, it needs to tell me. Then what ends up happening is that you have a lot of files that are not being tracked but are in your project. To me, one of the biggest problems Unreal has in terms of just the way they do things, like Unity was very good about this, because Unity, you had basically 2 folders. You had the library folder and the temp folder. So these are where things get cached and whatever. So you know that if you have a problem with the server, you just go nuke these 2 folders, reopen the server, it builds them again, right? And also when you have version control, you can just go, hey, ignore library, ignore temp, and you're golden. You know that you're kind of tracking everything, so you can go reconcile the whole project. Unreal puts files everywhere, because when you're building a module, all the files related to building the module will be in that module. And when you have a plugin, it's in that plugin. And when you have, a game, whatever, it's in that, or an editor thing, it's in that. And because everything is modularized, now you have like 200 places that can have random data. So when you do a reconcile, if you had everything filtered out in ignores, this would be caught. But because you just do a build, you don't even see that you should be ignoring files. Perforce just now is going to present you like, here's 100,000 files that need to be that I found in reconciling. And then the visual the GUI of Perforce can show you like 1,000. So once you go over 1,000, it just has a text entry that tells you like 1,000 plus. So then you need to go to the settings and change it to like, let's say 10,000. But if at a certain point when you have so many of them, the GUI stops working. Like you cannot just go, hey, put 1,000,000 here. You cannot just do that. Even if you could, now you have a problem of finding it. Because now you have a little bit of scroll bar and you have to, okay, there's tons of trash here. Do these things need to be committed? I don't even know. Some maybe do, and we never added them, and some maybe don't. But you need to at least find yours. So what happens is that you tend to find what is the minimum thing that I can reconcile. So if I'm doing source code, I just reconcile the source files. Or if I'm doing like I'm working these materials, I reconcile the materials, right? Like you need to minimize it. But it gets worse, right? Because sometimes, oh no, wait, there's one more. So you have this system of exclusive checkout, right? So this exclusive checkout says, I want to work on this scene, give me this ownership of the scene until I commit it. Something that happens a lot in games, because again, I told you a lot of people use the same assets, right? So something that happens quite often is, so you have a scene and people are working in the scene, putting new things and whatever, but you need to debug the scene. So for example, you have a door that you need to break free things so that then the door can be open up and then you can do. So what you generally go is you open the scene, move those three things next to the door, move the player spawn next to those three things so that you can just spawn there, do the thing, and then you can just test, debug, it's not working, why it's not working, okay, do it again, do it again, do it again. So now when I'm going to edit the scene, it's going to be like, you can't, it's checked out by somebody else. And actually, to the credit of Unreal, I think this improved quite a lot in the past, maybe since Unreal 5, I don't know. But you have this feature that inside Unreal, you can just go make writable. And the Unreal plugin kind of tracks this. That's why I mean that the plugin in Unreal is better than all the plugins I've seen so far. And so Unreal kind of tracks that for you. But for example, in Unity, you didn't have this. So you would have to go to your file system, right-click on the file that you want, remove read-only, right? And now you created a problem because you have files. Perforce still thinks that you have the latest version of this file, but you have local changes because you're doing something. So now whenever you're done, you need to remember to go to these files and force get the files. Force get is an option that Perforce has that you just go, force get me the latest, and Perforce goes, well, there's a file here, but it doesn't matter, I'm going to delete it, ask for the copy from the server and write it, right? If you don't notice this, or if you forget about this, you're going to see, oh, I'm on latest, I click latest, there's nothing to get and whatever, but you may not have files, or you may have different files than what you should have. So Perforce doesn't really track accurately your changes. This to me is like, this is super problematic. Okay?
Yeah.
But there's a level above this of like elite level that is, and so this one, I know what it happens, right? It has to do with things being writable and whatever. The other one, I don't know why it happens, and I've never met anybody that knows. So if somebody that works at Perforce sees this and could say it, would be great to know. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you should have files in your file system, but you don't have them. An example of this was like I was working on a game that had shooting and you had like a crosshair, right, that you have to aim. And the crosshair was like a small pink dot or red dot, very small. And I'm like, I can't even shoot, like I can't see where I'm aiming because with the noise of the scene, I can't even see where the crosshair is. So I go to the team and I ask, hey, this is how my crosshair looks. Is this correct? And the guy from UI is like, no. It should look like this. Sends me like a screenshot of how it should properly look. So then I go and see that folder, and let's say that I should have, let's say, 16 files there, but I have like 4. And, I need to, I do get latest, and it's like, yeah, you have the latest things. You need to actually go force get latest. So it nukes everything and gets everything. If people are working with Perforce, I highly recommend once in a while, go to because in code, it's generally not as much of a problem because you forget some code, so then it doesn't compile, you detect it straight away or whatever. But I highly advise people to just go to their content of the project, like the data assets, yeah, blueprints, whatever, and do like a force get latest. Because sometimes it's quite scary. Like it takes a while, right, to do, because it's basically nuking the whole content and getting new files. And then, it finishes, it says added 322 files, deleted 1,000 whatever, changes 800 or whatever. To me it's mind-boggling, right? That this is what's considered the state of the art for version control systems for games. And on top of this, you're paying so much for it, right? That when you see like a bill of 120,000 euros or dollars or whatever, right? And you go like, fuck, we're paying this much for this trash. Like, at least improve it, right? But it has this problem, right? It needs somebody to go in there and just clean it up and just, it needs a new hand, somebody that wants to take risks, right? So yeah, basically that's it.
I work like at my first company, Akamai, I worked with Perforce. So it's like a nice refresher. I don't know how it will be on people that were like Git only, because that's a lot of weird, like when we talk about Git, it's more like why Git doesn't work the way that you'd like it to.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talked about Perforce, it was more like, wait, this seems like it doesn't work at all. Like, it's broken.
And that's the thing, like, but still, with all these problems, it's still the choice, right? Which tells you something, right? Like, every company that I've been at, there has been that phase that you have build machines doing stuff, and we go like, the build is not correct. The things that you said that were on the build are not the build. And you're like, what do you mean the things that I said are not on the build? What are you talking about? And then you have to dig through, and like everybody went through this phase. You need to dig through what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And it's because of these errors with data that they just slowly accumulate over time. And then eventually you do builds, and the builds don't have the data that you think they should have. So quite often you're going to have like options in the build machines that go like, I want to do a clean build, right? So that you can go, look, this one is to test, right? It cannot just be a fast build to do stuff. I need to test this, nuke the whole thing, get me a new fresh copy, build it, right? And to me, this is just mind-boggling, right? That this is it's like the state of the art, right?
At this point, I think it's great that you have a feature to do that. Because like, what if your central copy also would have some sort of errors? And like over time it would accumulate some sort of holes, and you'll be like, okay, where are my files?
That's the thing, like, I think probably internally, I'd be I'm pretty sure there's got to be people internally at Perforce that are like, guys, we need to improve this, guys, we need to make this, blah, blah. Look, I have this strike team to do this, give me just time to do this. But I think everybody's just afraid of what instability will this generate, right? Are we going to all of a sudden just break everybody's projects? Are we going to lose data? Like, this is something that is just very, you need to have a person that is like, yeah, I'm confident and I have the accountability for it, and I have it's very difficult for it to happen.
Now, ARK. Okay. We talked briefly about ARK in terms of like, what features does it have? How does it look like from the outside? But maybe it would be a good time to do a demo of ARK and get to know ARK a little bit.
Sure. So let me just do some reorganization here. By the way, you want to hear another funny thing? It doesn't really, it's just curious. Do you know that when you're installing Perforce, you need to choose if you want to install Perforce to run it like a built-in server, or if you want to install it in a way that you can run servers for others. So if you want to try Perforce, I'm locally going to use my own little server, so I don't have to set it up as a separate server. you need to uninstall and reinstall Perforce.
What?
I'm telling you, this. I hope this hasn't changed because last year or the beginning of this year, it was still there, and it's hilarious to me.
Okay.
So anyway, first of all, shout out to Vyakoslav for supporting the
Yes,
demo.
the author of File Pilot, here in the left bottom corner of the screen.
And so ARK, like I said, it's just a small binary, right? It's this. At the moment, it's like 8 and almost 9 megs, which bothers me because I haven't really changed things. I just updated things that it depends on, and it gained like a meg and a half. So it's annoying. But anyway, one day I'll clean it up. So by default, right, you don't have anything set up. You're just going to launch the app, and this is going to give you a GUI version that just doesn't have anything, like it doesn't know any workspaces. So workspace is a concept that I borrowed the name from Perforce, and it basically means this is my file, this is my working directory, right? So it's where I'm going to put the stuff, and I'm going to sync with the server, right? I'm going to work from this folder. So the first thing we're going to do is, okay, we're going to create one, and we need a path for it, right? Where we want to work from. And then ARK allows you to do something that is called a built-in server. So a built-in server is just a server, because ARK works in this centralized mode. It has client-server architecture, right? And I decided to make them just always work this way. So whenever you use the built-in server, what it does is it's going to create a server inside your workspace. And then when you launch the GUI, if it sees that there's a built-in server, it launches it, and then you connect, right? So it just makes it easier for people that want to work by themselves, because they just have to launch the GUI. It handles everything. You don't need to launch separately the server. You can still do it, and especially if you're working with more people, you'll want to do this, because otherwise when you close your editor, you don't have access, right? But it's basically, so for now, we're just going to create that. So it has a port, right? Because again, it's a server, it's a full-fledged server. And you define your email, right? Which eventually will have more features tied to this with password resetting and whatever. I still didn't do this kind of stuff. But anyway, at the moment, everything is tied to this email as a user. So when you create, so let me open here the folder. So this is a clean folder. So when I'm going to create, a few things are going to happen. Because it's a built-in server, it's going to create a server in this workspace. And it's also going to create an ARK folder, which is basically like the Git folder, right? Where all the metadata, all the cache stuff, everything's going to go there. So this is at the moment what happens. The first time we do it, we give it a little pause, because the server creation, as you can see here, it's already there created. The server creation also sets up SSL certificates and whatever, so you don't have to worry about this. Like you don't have to, now I have to go somewhere else to do a certificate. It just does it. You can also create your own and replace them. That's fine. But by default, it just creates one for you. And because I'm the first person to connect, and it's going to allow me to be the admin. So it's going to accept whoever connects first as the user. So at the moment I connected to the server, I have the server running. You have here, I need to do some changes here, sorry. Here we go. So you have here the view, and for now, let's just remove this. I'll explain in a second. So for now, you have the base view of when you open the workspace. You don't have anything. By default, here at top, you have the project. It creates, since you're the first person connecting to the project, it creates a project for you, which is basically a repository, right, in Git, and a default branch, which by default ARK just calls it dev, right? So it created a project Sigma and branch dev. Here, this view is the files. It's collapsed, but you can open it here. So this is what is being added to your, or what's part of your workspace that is or being tracked, right? So things that are ignored would not be visible here. So for example, that's why you don't see the ARK and the ARK server. It has a changes panel, whenever you have changes, things are going to appear here, the files are going to appear here, and it allows you to create change lists basically, which are grouping of changes, right? So you can move. So the way ARK works is kind of like Perforce. So you kind of track files, you don't track diffs. Like when you have Git, what happens is that, you know, a little change is going to be something that then you stage, and you can, for example, stage two parts of a file in different commits, right? You can keep some parts off, and then you just stage part of the file change, commit that, and then, you know, stage the other part and commit it separately. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can do it like, yeah, if you can do 2 commits changing the same file.
Yeah, because what you're basically saying, you're not really working on files, you're working on diffs of files, right?
Yeah.
And ARK doesn't work like this, because the idea of ARK is just to be simple. So you have a file that has different things, so it's just how Perforce works. It's easier for people to reason about it this way, right? And then here you have the history. So these are the things that were committed. And here is the change list details. It just shows you like the history, the details of each history entry. Here we have some stats. We can just dock them here so you can see it. And so by default, something that it also creates is that ARK ignore file. So this is basically to help you have some sane defaults. I reverted it, but if you want to create, you can just create a file that's called .ark_ignore, and it works like git ignore and p4 ignore. It's just a file where you put rules of things that need to be ignored. But it also has this entry up top, and you can just go, okay, create an ARK ignore. The ignore is here. If we double click on it, this is kind of explaining how it works, right? This is like comments. And then here it's like, you know, ignoring certain patterns. So for example, if you're using Unreal, it has already some stuff for you, or Unity. And if, let's say, you don't use Unreal, you can even come here and just remove a bunch of entries. You can just clean it up, but it's just helpful to have a useful defaults. So now that I have a change, right? So this what basically did was it created a file. ARK detects that there's a new file in the file system, marked it as change. When I hover here the file, I can see that it doesn't have an ID yet, right? So this is a new file. ARK doesn't know about this file yet. It also knows this is something coming in this new feature, in this new version, that is the content is text. In this new version, I'm already doing stuff to determine, is a file binary or is it text? So now when I'm going to commit, so I right click on this change list. When I'm going to do commit, it asks me like for a little message, yeah. When I commit, it goes to the server and it's there, right? So far so good?
So far, so good.
So let's say that now we have another person working. Yeah. So let's add here Łukasz.
Maybe not so far, so good. I have a couple of questions. No, but like, for example, you mentioned that it is the text content type. Is this based on extension?
This is based on, the content type is based on reading the file. So it listens on OS calls that will tell you if there's changes in the OS. When it sees that there's changes in the OS, it goes through these files, opens them up, hashes the whole content of the file, right? And at the time that it's doing this, it's also trying to see if you have any zeros on the file. If you have any zeros on the file, then it means that it's a binary.
What? Why?
So
why zeros?
Because in text you cannot have zeros, right? If 0 is like null, so you cannot, maybe I could do something more smarter than this, because, in theory you can have a binary file without zeros, I guess, but it's just common that if you have binary, you're going to find a byte that is 0. Right?
Okay.
Like you could do things that are more elaborate, but everything that you kind of try to do that is more elaborate, the more time it's going to take. So you need to think, does it make sense? A good example is like, do I care that I'm detecting if it's UTF-8? You may want to, but I'm not going down this road, because then you have to, see if the files, if all the bytes make sense in UTF-8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the moment I just go, if this has zeros, it's binary. If it's not, then it's text. Right?
Okay.
So yeah, it parses the file, and when you hover here, the file, you're going to see that checksum. That checksum is basically the hash that it generated with the content of the file, right? So now let's say that we have somebody else that wants to connect, and the first thing we need to do is, like, the first guy was able to just connect because that's the way it's set up, but every other user you need to add them, right? So we'll just add a new email, and we'll add a normal user, right? But this has to do with permissions to do certain things.
Okay.
So we have now a new user, and now this guy can just go and select a new folder. He doesn't set the built-in server, right? Because he doesn't want to run a server. He wants to connect to one.
Yep. Now the server is authenticating the new user.
Yeah. So for example, if I go, let's say I write it wrong, yeah?
Yeah.
When I'm going to connect, the login fails, right? Because this user does not exist. So I need to go here into connections and make sure that my connection is, it's a user that exists. So when I connect, now because you don't have password, it just accepts whatever password you come in with. And now you're in. And you can see like already some differences, right? You can see that here it's dark on this side, and here it's light, it's like white. So this is telling you two things. The white means that so the text that is white means that you have this change list. Okay, the data of this change list is in your workspace. The white line around it, it's tell you what is the current change list you're on. And it's also the number shown here at the top. It says 1, right? So that's why this guy here doesn't have any line, because this guy doesn't have any content, right? It just has the .ark because we don't create the server. And it has here, it received the metadata that it has this commit, right? But you don't have the file. So you're still on version 0, on change list 0. You don't have anything yet, right? And you have this highlighted here that you have changes, right? And at the moment, the latest CL is 1, and it tells you that you're 1 behind. Okay. So when you go like get, now you got the thing, you have the stuff here. So far, so good?
Yep.
So this is like the base, let's say, of it, right? So I can just have files, push files, etc. So now we'll go into more interesting features that come from ARK. One of them is basically borrowed from Perforce, and it's the concept of shelf. So like I was telling you, a lot of times you want to work and you want to work fast. You don't want to create branches, right? You just want to do, and this happens a lot in games. You're working with somebody else and you want to share some files with them while not leaving your branch, because leaving branches is super expensive in games, because it's not that much the branch itself, right? The mechanism. It's because a lot of times, like when you move to another branch, you may need to rebuild light maps or whatever. So or shaders. So you'll have something that gets invalidated that needs to be rebuilt. So you can even be able to change branches fast, but then you're going to have to download gigs, or worse is when you have to rebuild gigs, because sometimes people don't put certain things there, right? It's just cached locally. So there's this concept of doing a shelf. So let's just open up this guy and let's add something here at the bottom, right? A new entry. Again, I save the file. It automatically has the detecting that this has changes. So it has a new hash. By the way, we already have an ID for it because we committed it, right? And we have revision 1 of 1. It means that this file has a history of only one entry, right? It has been committed only once. And it was committed last on that change list 1. So I have changes here. Actually, there's a view here, an experimental thing that is not fully working yet, but it's this diff that just tells you, okay, you have this new thing added. So now let's say that I want to work with you. I want to send you something, but I don't want to commit. So I can do this, that is shelf. And shelf, what it is basically, and this is how ARK works. When you commit stuff, you don't actually commit stuff. What happens is you shelve stuff. Shelving is asking the server, hey, I want to upload a bunch of data. Give me a change list ID so that I can store it in that change list. The server, in this case, is going to tell me like a here's change list 2 because we just have change list 1. And then I'm going to push all the data there, like upload all the data. And if I then want to commit, the action is like an atomic action. Is very simple, fast to do, because you already have the data there. So committing is basically just changing the state of that change list and adding that change list to the history of committed change lists, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right.
So you're always shelving, but sometimes you're not making a commit.
Because also sometimes when you're shelving, things are not instant. So it may happen that you're going to commit, but in between the time that you started committing and the data gets uploaded to the server and the server starts processing a request and starts trying to commit it, right? It may be that somebody locked the file. So you can always have a late failure of commit. So what's going to happen is we shelve it, and then when you try to commit, it's like, oh, you can't because you don't have the lock. Okay, just keep the shelf, it's there. If I then get the lock, I can immediately push without re-uploading the data, right? The data is already in the server. So let's say I'm going to shelve this, and you can see a few things happen. One is, first of all, the history didn't change, right? It didn't commit anything. And now you have this working change list that has a header here that says CL2#1. So this means that this working change list has a change list. Maybe names are going to be a bit confusing for people that are used to it, but it has so the workspace change list is tied to a server change list with ID 2. And the #1 means that it's the revision 1 of this shelf, right?
Okay.
So this guy, for example, here doesn't have anything yet, right? Nothing appeared for him. But this person now can work on this shelf by simply, here you go to workspace go to, or just Control G. And now I'm going to select change list 2, get it. And this gives me this window, which has the data of the change, and it has the option here to unshelve. When you unshelve, you now have a workspace change list also tied to that change list, to that shelf, and you got the data from it, right? So if I go here now and, right, you have the same data. So
Okay. Then why we wouldn't commit that? Can you remind me again? Because you wouldn't, you did pretty much exactly the same as if you were to commit and somebody take it back. It's just that we didn't want this to be there on the trunk yet.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
Yes. Because sometimes you're going to, especially when we're with programmers, I think it happens a lot with, if you're a UI programmer working with a UI designer, or if you are a programmer, like a gameplay programmer working with a technical artist, sometimes you need to iterate on things. So for example, they do some kind of hacky shader or whatever to get you moving. So it's not still the final version. They don't want to commit it yet for whatever reason. So they just want to give you work. It's the equivalent of putting some stuff in a floppy disk, sending you the floppy disk, and you getting it.
Yeah.
Right. And this is quite useful. And why is this so much better than, you can see this as lightweight branches, right? Because why is this so much better than doing branches? Because first of all, you're not getting further away from the timeline, right? You're still in the same timeline. You just have something on the side. If I now go get latest, I'm going to get the latest of that branch, right? Because I didn't switch to another branch. It also allows you to not have to force other people to change in order to accommodate for you. If I do a branch, and if I say I'm working on feature here, and now I need this technical artist to give me some stuff, you're actually imposing a big burden on him, because he's going to have to switch branches to be in your branch, do whatever he needs to and push it, right? And then switch back to his branch. And so he's potentially going to have to download and re-download gigs of data. He's potentially going to have to rebuild caches of shaders or whatever. It's just, it's becoming like bureaucracy right? It's burdening your way of working. And specifically, technical artists tend to be the kind of people that work with multiple people at the same time. So they're doing something for somebody for somebody else, and sometimes they just can't commit, or they don't want for some reason, right? And so this is very useful. I can just do a little snippet of code, send it to the server, it's there. I can even revert it, right? And it's still there in the server. I can later get it, right? So let's say now I need to continue my work. I want to revert it. I can. It's there in the server. Somebody else can use it or redo it. And so this is where the similarity with Perforce ends. Because the way in Perforce, the way this works is, so I can do a shelf. Somebody else can get my shelf. Now let's say that you update it. You do something, and I need to get it. In Perforce, what you need to do is move these changes to a new workspace change list, shelve that new workspace change list. So now you'd have the changes on change list free, and then I have to get change list free and unshelve it.
Okay.
So shelving is a cool concept that is just, somebody just shot themselves in the leg when they decided that you couldn't make this bidirectional. So ARK does this, for example, right? So if I go here and I just add something new, right? So let's say I just do this. I add a new entry. I have here, see, you have things. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Like, see how this is darkened here? Yeah. So this is to give you a hint, something that Perforce also doesn't tell you. Perforce, it's like the files are shelved, but you don't really know what if you have differences locally. And ARK gives you this visual cue. It's darkened. It means, and you see there in the tooltip, it says shelved. So this means that the file that you have locally is the file that is shelved. There's no local changes, right? And this is important because sometimes you may change things by mistake, and then you have a shelf that you think that has something, but because you maybe renamed the variable that was referenced in that file, it also changed that file, right? So you may have changes that may not be shelved. And so here, if you go to this guy, you'll see it's shelved, but it has local changes. You know what I mean? And this is very useful. So now let's say that I'm just going to shelve again, right? And this guy is now on version 2, #2. This guy is still on 2.1, but has this visual cue like the get latest that tells you basically you don't have the latest version. And if you hover here, it will tell you you're shelved, but you have remote changes.
Okay.
Right? And so, yeah, basically, I can just, update from latest. I can also open here the window and go through the different versions, right? If you're interested in that. But generally, people just tend to go for the latest. You know what I mean? So now if I'm going to unshelve latest, it's going to get latest. And now if I see the file, it's the same, right? And it's again dark because I don't have changes.
Okay. Now, on the right-hand side, can you now commit to this shelf and then get the changes on the left side? Like, because you mentioned it's bidirectional, right? Mm-hmm. So it works both ways.
Yeah. So I can shelve or I can commit it, right? So for example, if I just edit it here, so this is the version on the left, on the right. So I'm just going to put here, that we're going to ignore Łukasz. So
of course,
now this guy has changes, and I can just go here, shelve, right? By the way, disclosure I should have done at the start. This is a working version for the next release. If things break, don't.
That's too far. That's too far. Too far in the demo.
So I'm going to shelve it, and this guy now has this identification here, right? And if you open here the window, you're going to see version 3 of free was pushed by Łukasz, was shelved by Łukasz. Like, I'm the one that owns this change list, but you push that version. If I go to version 2, it's me, right? Because it doesn't show if it's the same, only when it's different person. And so now I can just, unshelve it. And I can, so I have here now this is stuff that is working. That's why it's experimental. Like, it doesn't refresh properly. I need to select it to refresh.
Yeah. It's, what if you have local changes and you unshelve stuff that has been modified? Like,
it should give you the conflict.
Okay.
Like, we can try now to see if that's working.
Let's do it.
So let's say, okay, so let's say that this guy wants to have this, right?
Yeah.
And here we're going to go, the one was WooCache 2, this is going to be
3.
WooCache 3, right?
Yeah.
So if this breaks, I'm going to go after it. So now I'm going to shelve this version. This guy doesn't have it, so now let's get latest. And you have here a symbol, right?
Okay.
And if you hover on the tooltip, you're going to see it's a conflict that needs to be resolved.
Okay.
Right? Because you had changes, you're getting new changes, and now you have this conflict state. So the file is still your file. See, it's still WooCache free here, but you have this state. And you have a few, I wanted to show you this later, but we can just go over it now. So you have these options to resolve conflicts, and you can just from here say, okay, I want to keep mine, or I want to get theirs, or I want manually, or this open window helps when you have a lot of them and you just want to do a bunch of them in a row. So let's just go with open window. By the way, this is something that drives me a bit insane in Git, is that sometimes ours is ours, but sometimes ours is not ours.
Because if you git merge and git rebase, it's swapped. Because now, like what you consider ours is not ours in rebase, in merge. It's like if you were to draw it, it would make sense, but it's obviously absolutely confusing.
That's the thing, right? When I'm working, I don't want to have that mental load of like, oh wait, because I did this, now I'm in there. You don't want to do that. Anyway, good tools, guys, good tools. So when I go open the window, it's going to give me this this thing here. You'd have all the entries, and now here you can just go, for example, keep hours, right? Which basically now you have the same things that you had. You can then override it, so you can go to theirs, and it just warns you because you already resolved it. By the way, when you resolve it, it has this check mark, right? And it's darkened here in this window. So now if I go here, you'll see it has WooCache 2.
Yeah.
And you can always go back to hours, right? So if I go back hours, WooCache 3, right? And I can just go manual. And manual will just launch a window to solve it. I have Beyond Compare installed. Like there's a few things that I try to populate in the preferences for you so that it's just easier that, you double click and it opens and stuff like this. So it gives you this guy, right? And it's giving you here that there's the base version, right? You have theirs, that is 2, right? Which is correct, it's 2. And you have ours, that is 3. Right?
Yeah.
And here you would select what you want to do. Here I'm just going to go no. And then it actually tells you like if you leave the app in a bad way. But even if you saved something, let's say that you change it, you can always go here and discard it, right? And revert back to what it was. So here, let's just say that we want theirs, right? So we're going to get the WooCache free, and now we can just, for example, commit, and hopefully nothing breaks, and great. This got committed. There's a new change list here. Number 2, I'm on this current because I just committed, and there's no change list between the last one I was and the one I committed. So this means that I can just be on the next one, right? And it says here I'm on 2. On the history on this side, you're not, right? You just got that 2 was committed. And you have this notification that you can get latest. And now you have 2 options. Like one is you can just revert things here and delete this workspace. But since this is the thing that we have here, if I go get latest, it's going to have no changes locally. So it just clears it for you, right? And yeah, basically we have this. And we can also select the file and we can go, there's no differences with revision 2 of the file. And there's, because we have the revision 2, and you can also diff with the previous version, right?
Yeah.
So at the moment, all makes sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's say that I'm going to add here a file, right? And I'm going to add something to it. And so I have here a file, and I'm going to commit, right? This guy doesn't have it, right? This one has it. It moves to version 3. Everything makes sense. Let's say that here now I want to edit this file. So this is tied what I said before, right? So let's say that, you know what? See? You see my scroll wheel going up and down? God damn it. So let's say actually, Łukasz 3 was too little. It should be Łukasz 4. So when I'm going to commit this now,
we're entering Git conflict area.
Yes. So see what happened here is this guy is the same, right? There's just new content that he didn't receive, the Łukasz. This one here, you're still in change list 2. However, because you just committed this data, you also have the data of 4, or of CL4. And here at the top, you're on 2. This is your current change list. If you ask, like, what's my current change list? It's 2 plus 4. Right? So this allows you to keep iterating and working without being forced to get latest, potentially recompiling things and whatever, right? It's just very useful when you're working day to day in games, right?
Wait, so far so good. So far it doesn't good, not good. You've been on 2. Yep. You had like a notification that there is 3. Mm-hmm. Then you created something. And then locally you still have 4. Like you have the changes from the 4, right? Number 4.
Yes, because it's a file that I pushed, right? So if I go here, the history, see, I have the 4 version with no differences. And these were on CL2 and CL1.
Yes. So you skipped 3.
Yes. And that's fine.
Okay, I need to mentally process this. My Git brain is just not allowing this to happen.
Why is it fine? Imagine that you're working on the simplest example. You're working on code, right? Or let's say you're working on textures, right? You're doing some new versions of textures for the UI. I'm pushing code that is going to force you to recompile the engine. From your point of view, I'm not touching your textures. I'm not doing anything on that vicinity. So why should I prevent you from pushing that work that is completely disconnected by forcing you to getting my changes? Does that make sense? Because this is completely orthogonal, right? Yeah. You can keep working, you can keep pushing textures, you can keep pushing models or whatever, because it's very frustrating when you have, and again, this has degrees, right? But usually the more pressed you are for time, the worse these things affect you, right? So you need to really get something done. All of a sudden, you're forced to get latest, and you have a conflict in the engine, a compile in the engine, and now you have to wait 20, 30 minutes. And this is not fun, right? You just get angry. It's one of those that you just, hit the table, get up, and go get a coffee. And that's the thing. Like, if the tool should be there to allow me to work, giving me a clear assessment of what's happening, right? We still know we're still on 2. I just have the things that I committed already because they're on 4 and I have the data locally. So I might as well track the things that you pushed are there. If in this case, free, instead of adding a new file, if in fact we had changed the ARK ignore, I wouldn't be able to do this because now there's a conflict. So then
when the conflict would happen?
When I try to commit, it's going to say like, you need to get latest.
Oh, okay.
And then you get latest, and then you have a conflict. And then you need to do that thing. I had planned to show you this way, but we already showed like the conflict part. And so then you have to choose, okay, do I want ours, or, this kind of stuff.
Okay. Now this makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that you can have like sort of conflicted files in this like superposition state. And then like, okay. But this also addresses one of the issues that Casey had with Git as well, that like when I say push the changes, just push the goddamn changes, and don't like force me to do some menial tasks when it doesn't matter, because I know that I didn't touch these files. Yeah. So
but there's a difference with my version and his, right? Because his, when he was talking about, he could push things that actually have conflicts. You know what I mean? In ARK, what this would mean is that you actually do a shelf. Like you cannot commit, because to commit you need to solve the conflict.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Means like trunk is always conflict resolved, like path. And if you want to do like push something that has conflicts, but still you want to do it with your version, would be to shelve it. And then anyone can go and take the shelved files and check them out, meaning they will get only the files that are changed, not like switch a branch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is one of those things that I think people that just aren't in games don't really realize it. And it's also part of the... my guess is that this shelving concept also came about because Perforce doing branches is not a simple task. You don't just right-click branch, right? Perforce doesn't have this kind of simplicity. Like you have the system, the build manager or whatever, create the branch for you. It's not even a branch because they have old school branches that are just super slow and super heavy. And then they had this new thing. It's probably like 15 years old or 20 or whatever, but it's the streams. And with streams, they allow you to do all amounts of crazy stuff that, for example, at the moment, I'm not even considering doing with ARK, right? Like a stream can basically map folders from different projects and stuff like this. It's just, to me, it becomes an overkill of complexity, right? At least for now. We'll see in the future, but at the moment, I don't see it as a valid thing. But still, this allows you. And another thing is that, it's good that you can just, because like I was saying, sometimes I need to work on files that other people are actively working on. So let's say that I set up my scene in a certain way to debug it. If I'm now forced to get latest, even though there's no conflict, now it may come that there's a new scene. So now I have to, one of two things, revert the other guy's scene, but I need to remember that I cannot commit mine later, because then because if I choose mine and then later I commit it, he lost his work, right? But, or I need to, revert his, revert mine, get his, change things, and then still remember not to commit, right? And maybe this is a good time to speak about a feature.
Of course.
So,
of course.
Because of this in Perforce, you tend to go... A lot of people that I worked with did this too. You create a special change list, and you call this change list something like do not commit. And you put files in this change list that you actively don't want to push. So ARK has something that is based... It's inspired by Jonathan Blow, right? Because Jonathan Blow, a few years back, I saw that he had a SVN pre-commit hook or something like this that basically says if you have no check-in in the file, then the commit will fail. The commit will abort, right? So ARK, now with this new version, it's not fully working yet, but you have this thing that you can just go here, and by default, it's #no-commit. And what happens is that by default, you flag that the file has been identified as this should not be committed. This is still not fully working, but the idea is that, now when I go to commit, and this is purely client-side, so you can change this keyword to whatever you want. But in the client side, it would not allow me to push, right? It's going to be, you cannot commit because you have files that you've said that you don't want to commit. And
so this is not like ignoring stuff for the long term. It's more like a short term thing. Like I want to embrace the code from myself, forgetting about this. So as long as I will not fix this file will not be committed.
Yes. And this is useful. For example, something that I use a lot is I have this instruction that I go break when I'm coding. Then I do this instruction that is break next line. And what happens is when it hits this instruction, it launches the debugger and it tells the debugger to connect on the next line. So it basically puts a breakpoint on the next line and it connects to it, right? So I can debug something. I can run without the debugger, but when this triggers, it happens. But I don't want this to live forever. I want this for my debug session, or maybe there's like some kind of default variables that I just want to comment or change, or some code path that I want to comment, logs that I want to add. So I can just put something and then just add this as in part of the comment to not forget about it. And then it's going to prevent me from committing this. Because sometimes it's going to happen that you're just going to forget and then you commit and it's there, right? And this works for text files, but it also has a version that you can just set it. If you right click on a file, you can just go set no commit. And now when you hover it, it's going to say it has commit in the file. So it was put there specifically in the file, and also explicit, because I explicitly said, right click, no commit. And then you can clear it. And, if I just go here and revert this, it should go away because it doesn't have that anymore, right? So I just thought that's a cool thing.
Also, shout out to 10x editor and author Stuart Lynch. Awesome guy.
True,
and awesome editor.
Should have mentioned that too. Feel bad now. This is my basically has been my Notepad++ replacer for a long time now. And I use also 10x for Unreal Engine stuff because it's just so much faster to do stuff. It still needs to improve some things. A lot of the things have to do with just complexity with C stuff, C++ stuff, but it's much faster to find stuff and whatever. But yeah. So what else? So far we've been focusing on text files.
Yep.
So now let's say that we want to go into, let's just get here latest so that we're matched. Let's say that we want to work with binaries. So the first thing, this is something that is not working at the moment, but it's going to be working hopefully soonish for the next build, because I now have this distinction of is it binary, is it not binary. So for now, files to be automatically locked. So you can always lock a file, right? I can just right click, even though this is not a contentious file, there are potentially reasons why I may want to lock this file so nobody else can by mistake commit it. Let's say that you have some important settings, you're getting close to a launch, you don't want anybody to override them by mistake. You can just go here, lock the file, right? And you have this information here that the file is locked. It says there the lock is by Nuno, and you have this little icon. Here the file is grayed out because you don't actually have changes, but you're locking it, right? So it's still in a workspace change list. And on the other guy, you're going to see that it has like a symbol saying that somebody has lock. It's not you. And, the lock belongs to Nuno. But for now, let's just remove this so you can explicitly do it. But generally what you do is you add ARK locks, right? It's the same kind of thing as the ignore. It's just this is telling you what files, what are the rules for files to locking, right? So in this case, it's just a bunch of extensions that if you find these extensions, automatically lock the file. So let me go here. Let me just grab this image. Let me put it here.
Automatically lock the file when?
When the file gets changed. So
okay.
Remember, in Perforce, you require these extensions that whenever you're going to edit, for example, a blueprint in Unreal, it goes, this is an exclusive checkout file. I need to request the checkout, get it, and then I can change the read-only flag, right? So ARK just doesn't do this kind of stuff. So at the moment, I'm just going to commit this stuff. So let me just get latest. So you have now the locks and you have the file. So now if I edit the file, right? And I just do something here, right? When I save, ARK is going to see again, like any other file, that the file was changed. See here, it's marking it as binary. It has like a little symbol there. And you can see content is binary and it's locked by Nuno, right? And now let's say that I want to edit the file here, right? So I'm just going to do something on the file. And the file is also changed. And see, you have now a different icon. It's a lock with a timer. So basically you're waiting for the lock. The lock belongs to Nuno, but you're in the queue to push it, right? So now if you want to commit this, it's going to fail, right? It created a shelf change list, right? Change list 6. It sent stuff to the server. When it's going to commit, it's saying this will be improved eventually. This kind of messaging. I know that enum error. Although commit locked by another is pretty clear. But anyway, eventually this would be some proper text. But it's telling me here, I shelved it, but I couldn't commit it because you don't have the lock. And so here now you have a few tools. So in Unreal, first of all, in Unreal, in Perforce, you don't have this concept. This is like when I say like ARK gets some concepts from other version controls and then builds what I think they should be, right? So in Perforce, you just have this concept of the exclusive lock. One person has it or nobody has it. In ARK, you have this concept of the queue. And so a few things can happen. One is if this guy just clears the lock, right? The lock will immediately go to this guy. If this guy wants... Yeah. You know what I mean? Because what happens in Perforce? You have a file that is exclusively checked out, but maybe you don't need that file. Because you were debugging, it's checked out automatically. Well, not automatically. You actually need to click it, but you're forced to kind of check it out because otherwise you need to do write only, whatever. So now let's say that I really want this file. So what happens is I'm going to try to use it. Oh, this is checked out by Łukasz. So I need to, ping Łukasz in the chat and be like, hey, do you need this file or can you send it to me? And if the guy doesn't need it, he goes, oh, no, I'm going to revert it. So what's happening there is a person will have to go revert the file. The file is in the server now without any locks. And then you're going to have to proactively lock the file. If somebody comes in between, they'll take the lock. Yeah. Right? So ARK just has this system of queue. So whenever somebody's in the queue, he will get it automatically after. And then you can do also certain things like, let's say I really need it. I can right click and I have some options here. And let's say that by default, I'm just going to say lock. Yeah. And I'm in this waiting state. I can right click and I can just go request lock ownership. When I send it, he gets a little notification here that tells him like, hey, Nuno wants this file. You can accept or reject. And you can just go, no, I need the file, reject. Yeah, you keep it. And here you get the notification, the guy didn't give you the lock. If you're an admin or manager, then you have tools that you can use. So one is you can remove all locks. So it just goes in and clears everything. The other one is you can take the lock. So you can forcefully take the lock for yourself, right? And this guy loses it.
Yeah.
The same way, you can also give the lock. If you have the lock, you can also give the lock to somebody else, right? So you can, if you're a manager, you can force take for yourself or somebody. But if you're the owner of the lock, you can also give it willingly, right, to somebody else, right? And this guy doesn't have it. And here, for example, I can just revert now. And this guy should now be able to commit because he has the lock, right? And it's committed. This guy has a new version. Boom. Make sense?
Nice.
How are we on time? Because
well, the
this
recording
is all going to be cut.
The recording is over 2 hours now. It's more like so there is a demo to finish, and there's a little bit of talk like how ARK works underneath, what would be the challenges of ARK, how do you like Jai and stuff like that, that I'd like to touch on. So you need to tell me, is there something, because right now we've got quite fair view of does it look like to use ARK, both on the GUI management, differences between Git and Perforce, locking files, unlocking them, lock queues, trunk-based development. What are the features that you'd like to also show?
So I'll just go very fast and show you how branches are handled, right?
Okay.
The idea is to be, because again, just because you're trunk-based, I don't want to make it hard for doing branches whenever you need to do branches, right? So you can just, I can just also show tags very fast. So you can just go here to tag, v1, and now you have a tag there, and you can remove it. Or, when you go to change list, you can just go v1, right? Anyway, just quick and dirty explained. So to branch, you just right click on wherever you want to branch, and you go here to the option branch, you just give it some name, and you have the option of just creating the branch or actually branch and switch. So you'll see here that there's a new triangle thing here. Triangle it means a start of a branch. So you have a new branch here, the orange branch just appeared. This guy, the white is still on the blue branch, right? And here the white is on the orange branch. So this guy is on this branch. Here you see it's Sigma test, this guy is Sigma dev. Sigma, it's funny. So now let's say that I'm going to make some changes, yeah? So bread, I'm going to commit. And you're going to see like this guy is now progressing along this, right? The other guy is getting the information, but he's on latest. Like get latest doesn't do anything, right? Nothing's happening here. You can then, so let's say that, eventually you want to merge. So I'll bypass that thing with the conflict, because now if I had changes and I wanted to merge, then you would have the conflict and then you need to decide what you want to do. But let's say that now, I don't have any local changes with this. I just want to merge. So to merge a branch, you just select, you need to be on the branch that you want to merge to, which generally, you always need to do this because you may need to solve problems and whatever. I don't think anybody allows you to merge without being in that branch. So you need to be on that branch, and then you can choose all up to the change list you want to merge, right? So let's say if you had 7, 8, 9, 10, it would be changes from 7, 8, 9, 10, or cherry pick. So cherry pick is useful when you just have, by some chance, in a bunch of change lists, you just need something that is only one of them, so you can just pull without pulling everything else, right?
Yeah.
It's rarely used, but again, it's one of those things that it's useful when you need it, right? And a lot of times you will need it. So when I just go here all up to 7, it's going to get, because there's no conflicts, right? It just brings that file here, right? Now I have here the bread. It doesn't have changes, but now I have here, by milk, by bread, and it has this informing here of the merge, right? So you have there that it has merges, it has 7 merged. And so when you commit, it's going to bring this, and you have the information here, but you also will see visibly here, right? And because now I'm on 8 and I merge 7, 7 is white because I got the changes from 7, right? If I didn't, then this guy would be dark, right? I don't know if you noticed before, it was dark before I merged it because I didn't have it.
Yeah, just like the dark on the 8 on the right-hand side,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, now if I, add just something here, if I just commit, right, I bypassed 8 and it's dark. So, and by the way, this is all kind of customizable. You can kind of go, it has here some admin tools, like you can go and create projects, create users, or you can, for example, edit these branches, right? You can just do whatever you want here. Test, no, actually it's called staging, right? And this just propagates through everybody. It has things like server configuration where you can just configure certain things. So for example, let's say that you want to whitelist a specific IP, yeah? Something like this. And you have a whitelisted IP, and it has admin log. So everything that is important is in this admin log. So here it's, for example, Nuno was created, Sigma was created, Dev was created, Łukasz was created, added the tag. All of this is like stored in this. And if you select it, eventually this will have some better visualization, but it gives you this kind of stuff. The name went from test to staging, the color went from this to that.
I now better understand when you were like, we need centralization. We don't like decentralized Git. Now I understand like what you meant by this more, because like in a way, like everybody works with Git in a centralized fashion because of this remote stuff, but you don't have this ability to just say, hey, you have like color green for everybody, and now when you have 100 people working at the same project, you can go from computer to computer, everybody's on the same project, and say, hey, green, don't touch that, green, don't touch that, like stuff like that. Like you have the centrally managed, you can also do the admin log and configuration.
That you take for granted, but that's the thing, like a tool is meant to help you do things better, right? So anything that the tool can do to help you, it's good, right? Like for example, the fact that I can just rename branches and it just seamlessly goes across, right? I don't need to worry about renaming things or whatever. Now I just wanted to show maybe one final thing, because I think I've covered like basically, there's a video, but I'll just link you the video because at the moment I don't have here the Git import, but it's actually, in my opinion, a very good Git import tool that I just did if you want to bring stuff from Git. And so, oh, look, this is also a cool thing. Before we do that, when you're doing very complex projects, sometimes it's very hard to know what is being ignored, what is not being ignored. This allows you to just go gather the ignored data, and if you hover, it tells you what's happening, right? It's like, okay, .arc is always ignored. This guy is not ignored. This guy is not ignored. .arc server is always ignored, right? It gives you this kind of stuff. So let's say that you would go now and we want to ignore every PNG, right? The guy disappeared from there, right? And it's marked as like being deleted. And here the color actually is not updating. Let's just refresh it. And it's telling you like this got added. What is the power that this gives you is that now if I go here to the bottom, I can go actually, if it is arc GUI.png, add it back, right? Because when you have ignores, you have to do this. I ignore, but then I revert, but then I ignore again. And here you're going to see it first was ignored by .this, but then this ignore was reverted, right?
You went a long way to have this, like, this particular thing annoyed me so much. I will have a list of things, rules that have been applied.
But that's the thing, like, when you need it, it's so difficult. Yeah. It's so difficult to figure out what's happening because usually these files are like tons and tons of lines and you miss a little thing and, anyway. So I know that these are struggles that, I've went through. So I just want that there's tools to help you with all of these things. Another thing that it has, for example, is here integrity check because people may be worried about losing data or whatever with the server. So every time you do an upgrade version, it automatically does this on the server, but you can also just select it and go run. And here it's very fast because you just have very little data, but it opens up all the data in the server. This is running in the server, by the way. You're running it from the client, right? That's again, GUI-first approach always. You're running it from the client, but this is actually sending it to the server. The server does it and the server reports the results. And so it opens up all the change lists that were committed, gets their data, decompresses it, hashes it, checks that it matches what you said, what was the hash when you saved it, and then it passes or fails, right? It just gives you this thing. So just want to find one final thing, because the whole point of ARK and big projects and stuff like this is that I want it to be fast. So at the moment I have here a binary that's 2.2 gigs. I'm just going to move it over to the client, and that's it, right? It's hashed, it's ready to commit, right? If I revert back, it's gone. And this may seem like it's simple, but when you have something like this boy over here, this is Unreal project, Unreal 5.6. This is like 200 plus 1,000 files and folders. So I'm just going to grab this boy, bring it here. And yeah, it takes a little bit, it takes a few seconds, but ARK is already working on it, right? It's already giving you like a bunch of things that it's detecting. Oh, this is new, right? It's checksumming and it's telling you here, look, I'm checksumming these things. It's telling you a progress. How long is it going to take, right? So it's allowing you to see, and everything tries to be responsive, right? It tries to be like usable, right? And this is the kind of stuff that if you do something like this without focusing on doing the GUI version first, it's going to be very hard for you to wrap around the CLI tool and get data like this, right?
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah, because it would be like git add dot, and then you would freeze and have no control back.
Yeah. And so at the moment, like, it's taking a while because the data is like it's cold, right? So it took like 62 seconds, a minute. So let me just revert this. Well, I can just leave this file here. Actually, let's revert this file, just so that we have the changes of the Unreal only. So you have here 223,826 files, right? The whole thing is here. Eventually, there's going to be something with that you can filter and whatever. These are things that are planned, right? That I'm going to do to improve the usability of these things. But again, this is all here, right? Like, you can just use it if you need to. So let's say that I'm going now to just commit this. Oh, so wait a second. Before I'll show you. So now that the data is not cold, right? If I just move it out, again, moving this amount of files that are new takes a bit for it to trigger it, right? Because it has to do with some processes that I didn't time slice yet. So that's why it chugs a bit at the start. But the files are gone. And now I can just go here in Unreal Engine again, put it back. And now it's going to be considerably faster because now things are cached by the OS. So, ARK itself is much, much faster. You're not that dependent on loading things from disk, right? And by the way, everything that you're seeing here so far is single-threaded. This app is still not multi-threaded. I'm focusing on the way I like to work is I like to make sure if something is not fast single-threaded, it will not really be fast multi-threaded, right? That's my approach to it. So see, now it just took 27 seconds to do the whole thing. And now if I go and I commit Unreal Engine, again, giving you some breakdown of what's happening, the time elapsed. You're going to get here some graphs with the data being sent and back and forward and how many uploads it still needs to do. So yeah, now it's uploading and it's telling you, look, you have this amount of bytes that needs to go through of this. And this is extremely helpful. So many times you're doing a download or a commit and you don't know how much data is going and you just see a progress bar that you don't know, is this just a lot of data? Is just this a slow connection? Is this just a lot of files? I don't know, right? But here, committing, so getting like the source, under 2 minutes you can get from a cold start, right? So here it took 42 seconds to shelve, then commit is basically for free, right? Because it's already in the server, right? And you have here the thing. And now, because the files already exist and everything has an ID and whatever, also the cache is much better. So now when I move it out, it's going to be much faster, right? See, it already is there. And now let's say that I go here and edit something deep. Let me just go in some of this. So let's say here. And here I'm just going to put like... Right, so I'm just going to save this, and I'm going to now bring this Unreal Engine again.
So you now took out the directory, and then you took back with a changed file.
Yeah.
That was somewhere in the...
Somewhere in the middle, right? And at the moment you see that it's computing the checksums, right? It's already at 50%. And actually now we're going to see a lot of changes here because of the locks. Yeah, it's going to appear a lot of stuff here, but we can just revert the locks. So yeah, when it's finished, see, there's the change. There it is. And this is just, all these files is because of the locks, because these are files that are going to be logged, and because it saw that the files were added, so it automatically logs them and whatever, right? I can just go here and just revert, not revert, I can just go unlock, and basically that's the change there. Like, something like this, back then when I was doing my tests, something like this that in like under 2 minutes you can do in ARK takes like 12 minutes in Perforce and Git. It took like 30 minutes in SVN. I tried it, and like around 30 minutes I just killed it because I was done with it. Git with GUIs also just hangs and you don't
Oh
know.
yeah.
So yeah, and this is like it is very important in my opinion, and not a lot of
Yeah,
people worry about it.
I think it's important to emphasize this because like for a lot of people that are not working with game development or like game projects, it might look silly if you work with just text that is like mostly source code and Git repository, and when you do commit and push and you wait like a couple of seconds and you're done. That's a whole different story than if you're working in like even empty Unity project, to be honest. Like if empty Unreal project already has a lot of files that are being created, and not to mention like the proper size of a game like Gwent, like if you're doing operations there on a project that has a couple of years and accumulated assets, that a lot of them are binary. Like right now, everybody wants like 4K textures on everything. It accumulates so much of this time for the simple operations. So like when 2 minutes here doesn't look like much, for RAD debugger, for example, to handle Unreal Engine projects that are of huge magnitude, it's still like the one of the like main challenger for RAD debugger to properly handle and debug through Unreal Engine source code, because it's like the top of the complexity that can be met in real world. So here we have like Unreal Engine project with 200,000 files that would not be fast on Git or SVN or Perforce.
And people just settle, right? Because a lot of times you don't actually have to worry about it because you have a guy or two that are the build managers or build machine guys, and they are the ones that will execute the command in command line because all the GUIs would freeze on them, right? But it's like, why do you have to, why wouldn't you want better tools, right? And that's the thing that I'm hoping that eventually a lot of people with version control understand that, like you can just have better stuff, right? It doesn't have to be that bad.
Nice. Perfect. Then we can turn back to the normal side of the conversation without the screen share and end the demo. And we're already quite advanced in terms of timeline. So maybe let's try to let's set a deadline for ourselves. It's 30 minutes, okay, for a deadline. Okay. So now tell me, for how long do you work on ARK, and how the project looks like now in terms of, like, is it considered finished? Is it like, does it sell already? In terms of licensing, we can also talk a little bit about like how does it look like for anybody who would be interested to try it. What should they do? So for how long do you work on ARK now?
Well, I started the project I think at around mid 2020 or something. But the thing is, ARK, I have a full-time job, yeah, and I have children. So basically,
And ARK is not a full-time job.
No, unfortunately, no. So ARK, basically, it's whenever I have time, and usually it tends to be, so I work, then I have kids stuff and whatever, dinner, and then after dinner I work, right? So given the working conditions, I would say I'm very happy with ARK. But also because of these working conditions, you also have some periods of demotivation and stuff like this, right? And sometimes, because there's not financial incentive, you also think about, damn, I'm wasting so much time here. Maybe I should just focus on being with my kids and whatever, right? So it's tricky. But basically that's how it's been done so far. It's like a hobby project done after hours.
Okay. It already has a licensing model, doesn't have clients?
Yes, very few. So it was one of those things that I was kind of hoping that there would be more support, because whenever you talk with people in the games industry, you generally tend to have this massive support of like, oh, dude, yes, let's replace Perforce. But then when you actually make something, very few people are actually interested in either working or, if it's a company, it's also tricky because a company doing tools for groups, for teams, is very hard sell. Like, if I do an editor, a text editor, that's great. Like, I need to convince one dude. That dude gets it, starts working on it, and then just becomes, if it's good, becomes an advocate. And then somebody next to him is going to see, oh, dude, that's so fast. What do you do there? Oh, this is 10x. Oh, let me get it. You know, so this is how things progress very organically with tools that just target a person. When you have a tool that targets a group, you need to convince the team to change. And all that it takes is the guy that is the most annoying guy and the most avid fan of Git just go like, no, I'm not changing for that, and blah blah blah, and then you go into a standstill. So at the moment, it has very few paying customers. Usually they're like people that just want to buy a license to support it, or people that give a donation to support it. And for a while now, a few months, don't remember when exactly I made this change, I decided to just make the change of, because this was the goal eventually to reach this place, to have a free version that is, if you're, so ARK already had this thing that if you're up to free users, you can just use it, right? At the moment, there's not even any telemetry, although I may need to add some telemetry to kind of know, how many people are using this platform or how many people are using that platform. So I can kind of focus in terms of just what I can do. But at the moment, it doesn't do any telemetry even or anything. And so it allowed up to 3 people to use it, but I already moved to what I'm hoping is the final, let's say, way of the model of the license that basically is based on revenue. So at the moment, if you make less than 500K a year of revenue, you can just use it, right? You can get it. You need to ask me for the license because I need to have this. I don't have a backend for licenses, right? So you need to ask me, hey, I need an indie license. Just tell me how many people you have. So I have already a few people using like 5, 6 licenses, yeah. And then eventually, if you pass the threshold, the goal is that, look, you like the tool. The tool is actually giving you a good value. The money for the tool, for each license. So it's a model based on seats, at least at the moment. You always question, should I change this? Should I do something else or whatever? But at the moment, it's based on seats. And it's like $49 per seat. But this is like perpetual seats. So whenever you buy a license and you say, let's say you buy 10 seats, this allows you to have 10 users, unique users concurrently connecting. It doesn't require any call home. So the license is a standalone file that you just drop in your server. You can have multiple servers using the same license as long as it belongs to you, right? And if you connect from 2 machines, it's still just one user, right? And it's perpetual. So it has 1 year of updates. After that 1 year, if you think that I'm slacking off and the app is not improving and it's the new Perforce, don't buy it. Don't renew it, right? And you can keep using the last version that was released until after a year, right? Which I think is a pretty fair licensing deal, right? Like if we compare with Perforce, if you want a team of 10 people with ARK, it would be like $490. Perforce, for new customers, a license for 1 user for the first year is $500. So if you want 10 users, you need to pay $5,000. At the end of that year, if you don't pay to renew, you cannot access with those people the server anymore, right? It's a renewal base. So I think given all of these circumstances, the fact that it has, built-in GUI and stuff like this, like a lot of times I talk with people about how, Git is free. And then turns out that they have 1 or maybe 2 Git clients, right? And Git clients cost like $60 to $100. And to me, that's just insane. It's like you're not really seeing the cost. Or, for example, that they're paying just so much per month because, we need to have Git LFS. And you're going to pay, maybe 20, 30 euros per month just so that you can use Git LFS, right? Because you need for your project that has a lot of binaries.
Yeah, because for Git LFS, you need to pay for the storage somewhere, right? Like like usually GitHub, for example, lets you store the source code easily, but there's a 2 GB limit. So now if you want to do something that has binary files, lots of data, now you need to pay for it, and then it's no longer free.
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of interrupted you here. Did you wanted to say something else on the
No.
licensing?
I think I've just, demolished you with the, nobody wants to hear me talking about version control. So you're like, oh, let me hear about it. Like, okay, let's go.
I think a lot of people want to hear about version control. And I guess maybe it's like a lot of people got accustomed, myself included, to Git to such a degree that, like, I've touched SVN when I was in university, but I never used anything else than Git, really, to the point that I no longer know anything, and I'm so accustomed. Like, of course, you just rebase from here, go interactive, and to like you get the line, and then you switch from like to S meaning squash. Of course, S means squash, and squash means like folding the commit into the commit that is up there. So if you do this and then leave the first line here that is not squashed, they go squashed. Like, of course you do that. Like, it's, it's refreshing to hear, first of all, a story about, first of all, Git shortcomings and where does it fall flat, because you don't often work with these projects. And then GUI-First approach, which is not Git, also, like how radically different can the story be for people working in the same project on the same code base and shared assets when you have a completely different tool with a different mindset, but like aims to do the same, but does this different. So that was awesome. And I was super interested in terms of how do you like Jai for the development of this? Because like, I don't know what's the size of other projects, but you might be, fighting for top two after Sokoban game from Jonathan in terms of size of the project using Jai. Like, ARK might be the second largest one. So how do you like it, just from the raw development side of things?
I'm not sure if I'm actually number two. Maybe there's a guy called Kujo, I think, that is doing Fat Goblins, which, by the way, is on Kickstarter. Go check it out, because he's doing the whole game from scratch with Jay and whatever. It's really cool. So support people doing cool stuff. But for me, ARK is the language that Jay is the language that makes sense. So to me, languages are like religions, right? It doesn't mean that one is right or wrong, but it just means that, this one is the one that suits me best. It's fine that you like C++, it's fine that you like Rust or JavaScript or whatever, but for me, the one that suits me is J. And I remember seeing the stuff from Jonathan Blow back in 2014 and just being extremely excited about it, right? And even originally when I saw it, because I just assumed that, if you're going to have another language coming, it's probably going to follow the syntax of C. And I remember him showing the new syntax, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to get used to that. But then I saw the video of him explaining why is it like that, right? And as I'm watching, it's like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't, if you're doing a language, why wouldn't you rethink things? So to me, it's just a language that suits me very well. And I have very hard time thinking of, unfortunately for work, I work with C++ still and Unreal, but anything that I can do in J, to me, is just a blessing. It's so much easier. Things work so much better. Compile times are ridiculously fast. Like ARK at the moment compiles in like 0.8 seconds or something like this. So it's just, you get used to this kind of flow. It's very hard to go back. The fact that the build system is also built in Jai, right? So you're using the same functions that you're using for the game to do things, right, in your build time. Like, for example, I inject the version at build time, right? The build time injects it into the binary. the fact that you can do meta programming, which it kind of scares me, what will come out of it, okay? Because I've seen Valigo's stuff and it's scary. But it's one of those things that when you need it, it's so useful. So for example, my network serialization and data serialization is using the meta program, right? So at runtime, instead of me going, okay, let me iterate through the members of this structure and are these things flagged to be serialized? Okay, serialize them, right? Instead of doing this, at build time, it generates code that goes, for example, is this struct tightly packed? So for example, it's just int, it doesn't have memory like a string referencing something else or an array referencing something else. It is? Okay, so now the serialization is just going to be a mem copy, right? It just block copies the things. So you're allowed to just build these things at runtime, at build time, and then you get much better performance at runtime, right? So yeah, for me, it's just the best language. I even did some video. I was so excited about it. And by the way it happened was, so I quit CD Projekt, and then, one of those, which is unfortunate. Like sometimes the best things happen when you don't have anything to do, because the mind wanders. And I was like, damn, I wonder what's happening with that J language. So I just decided to cold email him, right? And be like, hey, I just quit my job and I really love what you're doing in the language. If you ever open up for beta, could please consider my name, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. I didn't hear anything from him or whatever. And then maybe 6 or 4 months later, whatever, he's like, so here's the first beta release of J. And it was like 8 of us, right? Raphael was another one there. And immediately I was so into that language that I even created like a set of videos. I don't like to stream, but I created a set of videos that is like the joy of programming in J. And yeah, to me, it's just such a pleasant language to work with, right? And at the moment, I can't see myself going to anything else.
It must be rough to switch back from Unreal and J. It must be rough.
It is. Every day I cry a bit. Every day I open, a little overly templated file in C++, I cry a bit.
Yeah. On the topic of actual ARK development, what were the difficulties and challenges there, like technicalities?
Not really sure. Like, there's always this kind of like uncertainty because you're doing something new, or something with fresh eyes, like you don't have experience in it, right? So trying to think well about the decisions you're making because it's going to have an impact, right? Because because it's something that's messing with people's data. You need to be very careful how you upgrade and how you do improvements because you don't want, the worst thing that can happen is just people there waiting for somebody to lose their project to go like, this is trash, you should use Git. And so you're slower than, or I'm slower than I would like to. And I would say this is probably the main thing, this and time, right? Because again, I don't have the time to just work on it. In terms of like technical stuff, I would say that the most annoying thing was interfacing with C++ stuff. Because, for example, it's using ImGUI, right? So, and luckily, things have come a long way, and now there's this, for a while, there's this project in the J compiler that I think Luba does, Rafael does most of the stuff to update it. But it's like a program that allows you to generate C++ code more easily. But in the beginning, there wasn't something, or there was initially, or maybe it came up soon after, but it wasn't very reliable and stuff like this. So a lot of it was you doing manually things, right? And then all that it takes is you make a mistake and because an int is 32 bits and a long is 32 bits, but you assume that the long was going to be 64, so you marked this. So now you have issues with your data, right? So in the beginning, there was this kind of issues.
Okay. I joined the beta of Jai language when there was already a bindings generator. And when you were saying this, I'm assuming that in the initial phase when you joined, there was no such thing.
I don't think so. Or if it was, it just didn't work well enough. Like
Okay.
it would maybe generate some stuff for you, but then you would have to go in and fix stuff. Like I remember even having these things because when you have C++ and you have let's say a function that is supposed to return a vector or something, there's like this calling convention in C++ that actually, when you're mapping to that function, you need to define a function that receives the argument as a reference. Because what C++ will do is C++ will get the value from the stack. Even though you have a function that doesn't receive arguments, it just returns something. C++ internally will get something from the stack and pass it to the function. So basically, the function is actually writing to the stack. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, you'd have these kinds of issues back then, right? That it just didn't detect this kind of stuff. Or there were some issues also with name mangling. And I remember having some issues, but it's all like so long ago that I don't remember much. But those were the more annoying things. Like once I'm in ARK land, in J land, right? Everything works much better for me. Like it's just more fluid. It's just more, it's easier to work with, in my opinion.
You mean you don't miss like const references on const expr and then like static const and like you don't miss that?
Dude, that's
No
one
way.
of the biggest trash things.
And also
in programming.
unique pointers and smart pointers and weak
Yes.
pointers.
That's the thing. Like these are major. Like a lot of times people attack open object oriented or C++, but it's like if you just use it without everything that just gets added, you can have a much better experience in C++ or object oriented. Like a lot of people are anti-object oriented languages. I don't really care that much. Like I prefer J, and J is not object oriented, but it has a bit of sprinkle of object oriented, right? Because you can say you have this structure that behaves as that. So like you have a structure that has a child that is another structure, but if you mark it that way, you can pass the parent to a function that receives the child without having to dereference it, right? So it's little conveniences. It's like object oriented. It's helping you do these things, or templated code in a way, right? Because you can also just have this kind of templated code. But when you have things that just make your life hard, like one of them is private, right? Private is the worst concept. That is just it just doesn't make any sense. It just makes life harder of people that actually have to potentially touch that, because now all of a sudden you need to know that you cannot just access something. You need to jump through a lot of hoops to jump it. You can still do it. In the worst case scenario, you can find out what's the offset to that variable and just do a pointer to it and get it. So don't make it harder for me to get information. It's much easier that you just flag things. So if you just go, something I tended to use is I just mark, for example, a variable to just be underscore underscore. If you see a variable that is underscore underscore, you know that something is odd with that variable. You potentially shouldn't just write it, right? Or potentially read it. So you can just put a comment on top and say like, access it through this, right? But still, it doesn't block me from doing things. Another thing is the const. Once you go down the const rabbit hole, it's so frustrating that you're deep down in something. You want to access it and it goes, this is const. And then you need to go, either I'm going to remove const from this whole hierarchy, which by the way, people will be like, no, what are you doing? No, this is good practices. You can't remove const. No, now you have to add const to things. So you're just, you're not helping me achieve goals. You're just making my life harder with bureaucracy, right? That doesn't matter. So yeah, like I would say that these are things that I'm glad that Jay doesn't have any kind of stuff like this. It's just very, very straightforward, I would say. Makes it again, it's religion, right? If you're really into that stuff and you think that it's the best thing, go for it. It's just not my religion. I don't want to be involved in that. I have to at the moment, but life is life. But I don't want to be involved in it.
Nice. when you're doing ARK, what was the bottleneck in terms of hardware components? Like, when we're doing the Unreal Engine, checking in and then committing, was it disk and reading from disk, the data from disk to actually compute the checksum? Was it more like CPU bound? Like, what do you found that you're usually bound on?
So it depends. So if you're just talking about, for example, the reconciling, at the moment it's bound on CPU because it's just using one CPU, and it's a pretty straight thing to serialize, to parallelize, because you can just go, you can just have two files completely disconnected, and you just checksum them in parallel, right? It's just something I haven't done. So there's certain things like that are CPU bound, and at the moment, and the other stuff is also CPU bound, but basically it has to do with network. So at the moment, because you just have one core being used, when I push something to the server receives that in that same thread, right? In that it doesn't have multiple threads, just receives that request, processes it, and does stuff, right? So for example, when I'm uploading data, because now I want to be super careful, right? That's the thing. I'm trying to ensure that their confidence level is high, that I'm not going to ruin somebody's project or whatever. So when you're pushing something to the server, first of all, the client pushes the raw data. So I want to minimize potential failures. So the client, when it's going to start, he goes, hey, I'm going to push data of this size that should hash to this. Here it is. Server receives that and compares, right? Processes the hash to make sure in the end what he told me he's going to send and the size and the hash match. I also, at the same time, zip it, right? So I compress it, which is something that eventually is going to have some changes, because at a certain point, it doesn't make sense. When you have binary assets that are just too big, zipping them takes too long for potentially no gain, or a gain of like 1% or whatever. So it doesn't make sense. But at the moment, they're always zipping. So the server is going to zip it. The server is going to save it, and the zipped version, and the server is going to unzip it and double check that actually is what it was. You know what I mean? It's paranoid. It's paranoid server.
Okay.
So it goes like, look, when I processed the data, I double checked. Yeah, it was what you sent me. Let me zip it. And then it just goes, let me just double check that if I unzip it, I still have the same thing. And again, this is something that eventually I'm going to remove, but I prefer on being cautious and potentially detecting something fast, because then as soon as you're committing, if something happens, you'll immediately be flagged, and not like 3 months down the road where you're trying to access something and you can't. And so this is also, in a way, CPU bound, because the server is just doing so much stuff in one thread that it's just going to be slow. So your network velocity is also slow. And eventually I want to do stuff like, but this is like, performance, let's say, right? Is to change the network to be a UDP model instead of a TCP model, because you're going to be able to push far more data faster than doing that. So at the moment, I would say that the biggest things are generally CPU, just because there's a lot of work to do. And yeah, I just want first to reach a certain level, which by the way is close. That's one of the things I want to move soon to it, is to have a job system, because since I also worry about splitting things up so that the app is responsive, it also is going to make it much easier to parallelize, because things already have like these kind of containers in a way, right? That you can just have a block of work. So it's not like it's going to be for free because you have some dependencies on whatever. Certain things will be much easier, like the hashing of files or compressing or stuff like that, or sending stuff through the network. Because again, at the moment, the same thread that is checksumming files is the same thread that also sends stuff to the network, right? So yeah, hopefully soon that will be started.
Did you develop your own protocol for the TCP communication?
I wouldn't call it protocol, but I'm just sending messages. You know what I mean? Like you could call it a protocol, But I don't think it's something that fancy, right? But sure, let's call it a protocol.
But like if you were to use like HTTP on top of TCP, then you would send like, hey, here's like my request and this is something, right? Like, but you're sending this like raw TCP packets.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically so there's like a format to the message, right? It expects certain things. And then when it receives, it checks. And if things don't match, you get flagged as an invalid message, or you get disconnected.
That's a protocol. That's a protocol.
I know, but it doesn't feel like a protocol, you know? A protocol feels like something very structured, isolated in a library. And this to me is just, look, I have requests, and these requests, I have a few concepts actually. I have like the messages going through the network, because that's something. And then I have the concept of notifications, so things that are just one way, and requests. So for example, when you ask for when I give you the lock, that's basically a notification. Or when I commit, the server tells everybody, hey, there's somebody committed. That's a notification. But everything else is kind of done in this request response kind of way. But I just meant that, to me, this is just, it doesn't feel fancy enough to be called a protocol. But yeah.
I didn't know there is a certain level of being fancy to get a name protocol, but okay. And for the graphical things, are you using the Dear IM GUI?
Yeah. And at the moment, I think for the foreseen future, I'm going to continue using it. But I have a love-hate relationship with it, unfortunately, because it just feels like sometimes it makes it much harder for me to do things. And I know that it's not their goal, but it misses some polish, right? Like if you want to do a polished application, then it's going to be very problematic for you to do it with ImGUI. And at a certain point, if you start going that deep into ImGUI, you may as well just maybe do something else. So at the moment, I'm still using it. I think it's very useful. Like to me, ImGUIs are the best way to do interfaces, right? I just would love some kind of things like, a little bit more flair for my needs, and to have labels aligned to the left. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Because sometimes it just feels like I have to do so much more work to do stuff, right? So something that would just have been one call, now I need to make a bunch of calls, and I need to go set, do this text, and now go on the same line at a certain distance and set the next size of the next thing to be the remainder space, because if you don't, then it will actually not fill the space. So, it's just a lot of micromanagement that I wish it wasn't needed, but it is.
Yeah, but like Dear IM GUI never meant to be like public facing UI library. It's more like a tool to get you there fast. So
and that's the thing. I'm super grateful for it, right? Because it helped me to accelerate. And in every time that I'm doing tools, like Unreal Engine is horrible in my opinion to do tools. Every project that I work on, I add ImGUI because it's such a much better way to do tools. But I also wish that it was a bit, because we just have a lack of good quality multi-platform GUIs, right? It's just frustrating. People bash a lot Java, but Java back then, this is like in 90-something, 96 or whatever, it was giving you out of the box a way to do GUI that, you may not like it or not like it to look, but it was a good GUI, right, for multi-platform. And these days, if you want to do something, it's just so cumbersome, so difficult, and everything is usually retained mode. Now the ImGUI stuff is going getting a lot of adoption, which is great because it's so much better to debug to develop like this, because you immediately can go in. There's no binary assets. It's just tons of pros of using it.
Have you used Clay from Nick Barker?
I checked briefly when it came out, but it was just so macro heavy that I was like, I don't think I'm going to go down this road. I don't. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I mean, it uses macro mostly to do like one line at the end. Like, so like you do the macro clay and it just like, instead of do like begin and end yourself, it's wrapped in a macro so that you have like, you do this. But fair
I,
enough.
I just remember there was a lot of macros, and then when my mind also goes, okay, how am I going to put this into J? Oh, I'm going to have to hand convert all these macros.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just one of those things. But yeah, maybe I dismissed it too fast. I don't know.
You need to take Vyacheslav and just like, take him by the clothes, like up against the wall and like uh, kindly ask him to export his own UI library,
Yeah, yeah.
UI module, because he has it separate from the file pilot stuff anyway,
Yeah, and
or
I think
Stuart Lynch for that matter.
yeah, and I think it's something that probably quite some people would pay some money for it, right? If you give a good alternative that is cross-platform, minimal dependencies, just easy to use, I think there's a market there for somebody to make money. But who knows? Maybe nobody wants to pay for anything. Everybody will just yeah.
Maybe I think like that's a good call. Yeah, like that. Like
Oh,
if
there's
you
a
want to
free version
bet your
of
money.
something in GitHub. It's fine.
Exactly. All right. With this optimistic accent, I think it's a great place to end. Nuno, thank you so much.
Thank you
Can
very
you
much,
please
James.
tell where people can follow Arc development, where you're at in the online space?
Well, I mostly use Twitter. I also have Blue Sky, but I don't go there that often, to be honest. But I use Twitter, so the handle is like N Afonso PT. And yeah, basically you can check out arc-vcs.com. There's a mailing list there if you want to register to get some notifications. Every time I release like a 0.12, 0.13, I'm sending out emails. And yeah, basically that's it.
Nice. Nuno, thank you so much for
Thank you very
joining me
much.
today. 3 hours. 3 hours. Nice. This was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you.